This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, November 8th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it is 2 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The provincial government and QP are back at the bargaining table. And this time, Premier Doug Ford says he's listening.
Back at the table with an improved offer, particularly for the lower income workers.
Meanwhile, Premier Ford is urging the union representing the 55,000 education support workers to understand where the government is coming from with their own offer, as whatever agreement they come to will have massive financial impacts on taxpayers' dollars. And CHEO's Chief of Staff is calling on Ottawa residents to wear a mask once again. City News reporter Chris Curris has the story.
The hospital is struggling under the weight of children in their ER due to the perfect storm of respiratory viruses, flu season, and COVID. And CHEO is seeing long waits and an overflowing intensive care. Dr. Lindy Sampson at last night's Ottawa Board of Health meeting.
I think we need to get back to the principles that we know work, and that's in any crowded indoor space when we cannot maintain physical distancing.
She says that includes most crowded indoor spaces like grocery stores, gatherings, and at schools. Now, Ottawa's top doctor, Vera Etches, is also strongly recommending the use of masks indoors. The board voted to send a letter to the province calling for more transparency about the viral situation and to create a campaign to encourage mask use. Chris Curry's City News.
The weather forecast for Ottawa and the Valley. Here is City News meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have plenty of sunshine, but don't be fooled by that sun. It's cool today. The wind will settle down, though. Our guaranteed high just 8 degrees, but the average high is 7. It's just we've been spoiled with very warm temperatures. Cooler air now. Tomorrow, sunshine and 10, but then back to some warm air Thursday up to 17. For today, the guaranteed high, 8.
City News time is 10:02. A pilot project within the paramedic service and the Montfort Hospital is being announced this afternoon. The head of the paramedic service and outgoing Mayor Jim Watson will be among those at the East End Hospital to make the announcement. That announcement will be held at 2 this afternoon. Listen for that story with Danielle Bain and Jason White right here on City News, Ottawa. A Quebec lawyer representing a teachers' union opposing the province's legislation banning the wearing of religious symbols such as hijabs, turbans, says the law was adopted in order to, quote, appease racists who do not want to see religious symbols. The comments were made in the Quebec's highest court as the government and groups opposing Bill 21 challenged a lower court order that upheld large parts of the secularism law, but also struck down certain portions. Yesterday's argument centered on the Quebec government's preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause to protect Bill 21. Canadians are having an increasingly negative feeling about China and when it comes to global affairs, and we're not all that keen on the U.S. either.
8 out of 10 Canadians say that China has a negative influence on world dynamics. A new Nanos Research public opinion survey shows just 8% of Canadians think that Ottawa should make closer ties to the country any type of priority. Pollster Nick Nanos tells the Globe and Mail his research suggests that the U.S. is still considered bread and butter for Canada when it comes to priorities, while relations with China are strained. The fallout from the jailing of 2 Canadians in the Huawei saga. The same survey commissioned by the Globe and Mail felt that nearly half of Canadians felt the United States has a negative influence on world affairs, but Canadians are still willing to work with our neighbors to the south. More than 2/3 surveyed felt that Canada should make closer ties with the U.S. a priority, slightly behind ties to Europe. At the City News Business Center, I'm Mike Eppel.
And I'm Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Connecting you and your community. This is the Sam Laprade Show on City News
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, hello there, Ottawa, and welcome to the Sam Laprade Show. Sam is off this week as she focuses on her other role at the Legion National Foundation. Sam is assisting veterans and their families during this remembrance period. But I have good news. Sam will be making an appearance here on today's show. She'll be calling in around 10:45. She's going to join us and talk about the work she's doing while she's away this week. So really looking forward to that. We have a great show lined up for you. As you know, we've been covering, of course, the negotiations between CUPE and the Ford government. Doug Ford, another press conference this morning. Just having a look at some of the things our colleague Richard Southern, journalist at Queen's Park Reporter, of course, following this very closely. Just having a look on his Twitter feed. If you don't follow Richard Southern, I highly recommend you follow him because he's always on top of this. Ford says the government is back at the table with an approved offer for CUPE. He described his previous offer as generous. He's asked, it comes down to the art of negotiation. On Stephen Lecce, question about the job that he's done so far. Doug Ford saying he's done a stellar job. He goes on to say that he just wants kids back in school. He doesn't want to fight. He just wants kids back in school. On the notwithstanding clause and the use of the notwithstanding clause, I quote him, he's saying, I wouldn't call it a sledgehammer. I would call it a tool. And he went on to say, if I have to change my mind, so be it, says Ford, who says he's heard from Ontarians about making a better offer to lower paid CUPE workers. So we're going to be following this, of course, very closely. We'll talk about it throughout the show. We've got Lunch with Derek coming up. We'll talk about the news items of the day. John Wambombo, program coordinator of Safer Roads Ottawa, going to be joining us. They have tonight is Lights on Bikes event coming up. That'll be at the Corktown Footbridge over the canal from 4 to 6 p.m. We'll get an update on that and talk about the awareness campaigns that Safer Roads Ottawa has ongoing throughout the year. We're going to talk a little housing on today's show as well. So lots of different topics. I will be here with you for the next 3 hours. But we're going to start with continuing the talk about the negotiations between CUPE and the Ford government. I am joined by Tom D'Amico, Director of Education with the Ottawa Catholic School Board. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Derek.
Tom, what did you make of what you heard from Doug Ford this morning?
I actually have not heard the statements.
Okay.
I've been in meetings all morning.
Okay. Basically saying he is coming forth with an approved offer for CUPE. I'm not exactly sure what that means, to be honest with you. An approved offer, I guess approved by his government. He says he's going to make a more generous offer to the lowest paid CUPE workers. Do you think there's honest negotiations going on, Tom?
Well, we are certainly hopeful that they'll come to a settlement and that it's fairly negotiated. So we basically, as a school board, have some tempered optimism that we know there's still work to be done, but we're hoping that our staff that are back, that want to be back and are supporting our students and our students that want to be in person, that this will continue uninterrupted.
Tom, what do you make of the last 24 hours, what you've seen and heard from the Ford government yesterday, and of course CUPE's announcement, and then, rescinding Bill 28, the strikes, of course, collapsing, all the protest sites. What do you make of what's occurred over the last 24 hours?
Well, when we turned up for work yesterday, that's not what we thought would be happening. So that was good news, that we were preparing for a long-term move to remote learning, and we're really happy that our staff are back today. So that was the first reaction, is it was good news. We know it's not an agreement, so they have not reached the agreement yet, but it was a sign of good faith on both sides that they were willing to go back to the bargaining table, and that allowed us as school boards and educators to do our job. We're here to provide an education to all of the students in our area, and we know that what's happening in terms of politics and wages and negotiations has had an impact on our students. So we're really glad that our students are in person today, and we know that our 2,000 CUPE staff, they wanted to be back at work. So we're glad that they're back at work today, and I think there's a lot of people that are quite happy to be in person today.
Tom, what have you been hearing from parents throughout all of this?
Well, we really did hear from the two sides. So we heard from parents that were very supportive of what CUPE staff were doing. Several indicated that their children would not take part in remote learning, that they would be there to support the staff that were out on picket lines. And we also heard from the other side. We heard from parents that were very upset, angry, and frustrated that this was going on, and once again, their children were not in school. So we did hear from both sides, and it was important for us to be able to articulate to parents that we really want the students in school. We want our staff to have fairly negotiated contracts. In the end, that decision is now done by the ministry and the government. That in 2014, negotiations moved away from the school boards with their staff. So it's not up to us to make a change in the offer. We don't have the funds to do that. It all flows through the province. So we're hoping that parents understand that, and that right now we can take care of what has to be done centrally, and then it turns to the boards to negotiate locally. The local negotiations are all the non-monetary aspects of our contracts, and that's something that we would have lost with the bill that had been passed. So we'll be pleased to get that opportunity back to work with our local CUPE unit and make sure that we have fair working conditions for everyone.
Tom, what are those non-monetary aspects?
It has to do with things largely with staffing, with who can apply for different jobs, the postings of jobs, what happens when someone wants to transfer between schools. It varies by job classification. So on our board, we have the registered early childhood educators, our educational assistants, our office administrators. So an example with office administrators would be the number of additional hours that are available as things in the school are cyclical. So how we can support them in those areas. But monetary, when you look at the wage, the vacation leave, the benefits, all the key areas of a contract that people tend to start with, those are all done centrally with the government.
From a teacher's perspective, setting aside the 55,000 workers that we're talking about now, what have you heard from teachers as far as, their support? I mean, it's been, from what I've seen, they've been incredibly supportive, certainly made that known on Friday and then again on Monday. But talk a little bit about that and then how they see, these workers as incredibly important to the system, right?
Yeah, it's a great comment, Derek, and certainly in our caring Catholic community, our staff are comprised of everyone in that building. So it's not just teachers that work with students. They're an important part, obviously, the face of the classroom, but it's also the face of the school. When someone walks in and they see the office administrator, it's our caretakers that do an amazing job keeping our schools clean and safe and healthy. It's our technology staff that make sure the network is working, our educational assistants that provide such a support and service, the principals and vice principals, library technicians. There are many jobs that make up the education sector, and they are one community. So when CUPE was not able to have a fairly negotiated contract that was settled, certainly the teachers and all the others in the buildings, they missed having their colleagues not at school. They wanted them there with them. So they understood that this was part of the labor negotiation process and it had to take place. But they really missed not having them in the school. So we did hear from many individuals who they were not in a strike position. So you use the example of teachers. But what many of them did was they went to the picket lines before school or the political protests or after school or during lunch hour. So they were there to support the students in remote learning. That was a requirement of their job and for us as a board to offer an education. But outside of that, they were out there to support their fellow staff members.
Tom, in your role as Director of Education with the Ottawa Catholic School Board, do you play any role at all in negotiations?
Well, there's two levels of negotiation. So the local negotiations are handled by our manager, our superintendent of human resources, and our associate director of business, and some of our principals are giving them support. So that's what happens locally. At the provincial level, most directors or board staff do not take part. In the example of CUPE, I am there to give some advice and direction and support to the Catholic Trustees Association. Each trustee association has one director, has one superintendent of human resources, and one superintendent of business. We're basically the back room. So when they're trying to come up with their negotiations and they're making an offer on a particular detail, they'll check with the people that are in the field to say, if we do this, will it work? So we provide that advice and guidance. And in the end, the government, the Ministry of Education, Treasury Board, and the trustees associations, they work with CUPE to try and find a deal that works for everyone.
Tom, really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for joining us.
All right. You have a good day.
Thanks, you as well. That's Tom D'Amico, Director of Education at the Ottawa Catholic School Board. Coming up after the break, Steve Warren, veteran Ottawa sports broadcaster, host of the Sens Nation podcast, joining us. Lots to talk about when it comes to your Ottawa Senators. This is Derek Fage filling in on the Sam Laprade Show. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
That's the way I kill my skill sharpen, because I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, a.k.a. your favorite light skin, and you're going to check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911, call it in. Neon murder every...
When it comes to drugs, how much freedom is too much for kids?
Drugs are out there. Will my teen feel free to say no around other kids?
I didn't live drug-free when I was younger. Can I admit that to my kids?
Drugs worry me, but how can I feel free to talk about it with my kids?
Questions about drugs and kids? Drug-Free Kids Canada.
I don't care what the law is. I will never be a slave. That word, I hate it. It rests on my tongue like rot.
Peter, how does it feel to get paid for your work?
There are rumors freedom's coming for us all.
Freedom, you know that's all I want.
Chloe, careful. Real men would rather sell you across the river to America than let you go free.
Then I'll run.
I've run before. Maybe this time for good.
No! No! Just get her into a boat. No!
Chloe! Chloe, no!
Word of Chloe Cooley's resistance led to Canada's first legislation limiting slavery. After 200 years, slavery was abolished in Canada in 1834.
Donations to the War Amps have a lasting impact on amputees. Today, your support gives them the artificial limbs and resources they need for everyday activities and learning to live with amputation. Having access to our essential programs helps amputees prepare for tomorrow on their road to independence. The War Amps is committed to improving the quality of life for Canadian amputees, but this wouldn't be possible without you. To learn how your donation helps, visit waramps.ca.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. If you know me well, I love talking sports, in particular, local sports. And we turn our attention to the Ottawa Senators. DJ Smith certainly feeling the heat from fans. That includes myself. I'm going to put myself in there. I tweeted out my disappointment so far this season. Here's what Pierre Dorion, Ottawa Senators general manager, had to say.
I'm happy with the job that DJ's done, his staff has done. Obviously, at 4-7, it's a bit tougher. I think it's the first time that we've given him a team that can compete for the playoffs. So we're going to, one thing about Pierre Dorion is Pierre Dorion is very loyal. I think DJ's done a good job. He's shown that he can win. I'm not giving votes of confidence and everything. I think that's foolish. DJ's our coach. He's going to be our coach.
Pierre Dorion speaking in the third person there. Pierre Dorion speaking in the third person. Joining us right now to talk about that and a few other things, Sens. Steve Warren, veteran Ottawa sports broadcaster, host of the Sens Nation podcast. Good morning, Steve.
Hey, Derek. Steve Warren is happy to be here.
Derek Fage also happy to be here, Steve. I mean, Steve, did we really expect anything other than what we heard from Pierre Dorion? I mean, what else do we expect him to say, right?
Well, if he's moving forward with him as the coach, then yeah, he has to justify why that is. It would be a little odd for him to bury DJ Smith at this stage of the game and then continue to move forward. But, I do believe, though, that Pierre Dorion is a big DJ Smith fan. I think across the board, he likes the way he coaches. He likes him as a guy. And I think that he's at a stage where he's comfortable moving forward. Now, if they go through this week and drop 3 more games and suddenly the 5-game slide becomes 8 and things get louder on social media, we'll see if that actually changes his opinion. But for now, it looks like it's the status quo.
What do you think, Steve? What do you think about the job he's done so far?
Well, I'm hesitant to call for coaching changes because it is still pretty early, and they do have some underlying numbers that suggest the Sens are better than their record shows. I mean, for example, they're like as a team, they're not a minus in goals for and against. They're down third last overall, and they're not a minus. So that might suggest that, okay, they could have a better record than they do. But honestly, Derek, I do think it's time for a change because this is not a one-off here. This is 4 years in a row they've gotten off to sketchy starts. And the league is a results-oriented business, and the results right now just haven't been there. And not only that, the same problems seem to persist. Sens still disorganized, that is, in their own zone. The coach keeps favoring those veteran guys who don't seem to have it anymore. And so I think asking for a coaching change is not unreasonable at this point.
And, when you look at a coaching change, obviously some of the talk, I mean, people are throwing out Barry Trotz's name there. I mean, you're talking about paying a guy probably upwards of $5 million. And I wonder with the team up for sale, maybe it is time to spend some money on an NHL coach, Steve. If you look at the past few coaches that we've had, obviously interspersed with some NHL coaches that have had a lot of experience, but they've brought in a lot of inexperienced coaches. With what they've spent on players, is it time to spend money on the coaching staff?
I think so. I mean, I think it was time 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, really, any coach right now that, not right now, any coach in the last little while under former ownership that was looking for more than $1 million need not apply.
Right.
So I think that what we saw in the offseason, the summer of Pierre, with the acquisition of some expensive players, clearly the team has turned over a new leaf as far as their finances go and their willingness to spend. It may be to impress the next owner, I don't know, but I don't think Sens fans care that much what the motivation was, so long as it is happening. So if they've made these kinds of moves for their roster, and at some point, whether it's soon or later, they decide to make a coaching change, sure, why wouldn't this organization invest a little more in a very important position on this hockey club?
Well, let's talk some players here, first of all. When it comes to players, that's sort of top of mind for me is Thomas Chabot and his minutes. And I'm starting to wonder, is it finally affecting his play? You've got Jake Sanderson, who's shown he can play at a high level in the NHL. You've seen improvement from Eric Brandstrom. Why aren't those guys getting more minutes and spreading out those minutes? I just find it's frustrating. And on the power play, I don't think Thomas Chabot's been effective whatsoever. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is part of the discussion about DJ Smith, what's going on the blue line right now. I know I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth a little bit, but there is a little part of me that blames what's gone on in these last 5 games on what's happening on the blue line, because they only had 3 top 4 defensemen going into this season. Then Artem Zub gets hurt, and then you have Thomas Chabot, who's not playing like a top 4 defenseman, and so you're basically down to Jake Sanderson as far as guys, in my opinion, that are going as real true top 4 players on the blue line right now. So I mean, Chabot definitely, I think everybody agrees, and I'm sure DJ Smith would agree at this stage, that he'd like to dial back the minutes, but he feels like that's still his number one guy, and in so many games they're trailing, they need goals, they need offense, and so they tend to truck Chabot out there maybe more than they would like to otherwise. So that's kind of, in my opinion, the state of the defense right now.
What do you think about the insertion of Jacob Bernard-Docker into the lineup tonight? It looks like he'll be partnered with Chabot. In order for him to stay in the lineup long term, what do you think he needs to do? I mean, he's replacing the much maligned Nikita Zaitsev, and if Nikita Zaitsev was making $1 million instead of maybe $4.5 million, he wouldn't be such a punching bag, certainly for fans. But this is a real opportunity for Jacob Bernard-Docker, isn't it?
It sure is. And I don't know what he'll be as an NHL defenseman, but it's clearly time to kick the tires on the guy. The guy was drafted a long time ago. I think maybe even before Brady Tkachuk, if I'm not mistaken. But he's been in the organization for a while, and it's time to see what he can do. From what I've seen from him so far, Derek, he's not exactly dazzling in any element of the game. He's not wildly physical. He's not dazzling offensively. He just seems steady out there. And, man, what could this blue line use more than a little steadiness to get stabilize that back end and the defensive zone? So I'm looking forward to seeing what the team looks like in their own zone with a guy like Bernard-Docker out there, because a bit of steadiness would really come in handy right now.
A lot of talk about Ryan Reynolds. I mean, last night he told The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon that he's looking to join a consortium of owners for the franchise. He went on to say, I love Ottawa, grew up in Vancouver, which has my heart always, but I also grew up in Ottawa, Canada, of course he has to say because he's in the U.S. Spent a long time in Vanier, but it's interesting that, this is probably the biggest public acknowledgement that he's made that he is looking into it. I mean, his net worth is about, from what I've seen, is about $150 million. So obviously he needs to have other people come in, but do you think... Should we take this seriously, do you think, Steve?
Oh, I think so. And I saw those same stats online about $150 million, his net worth. I question that a little. He makes $30 million a movie. He's got his gin empire. He's got a mobile phone company. I think the guy's worth considerably more than that, but I saw the same stats across the board online. I certainly think it's a neat idea. I like it. He would obviously be only a minority stakeholder in the team, but he'd add to the cool factor. You probably have some major merch sales happening outside the borders of Ottawa for the first time, maybe. Yeah. Because people would just want to be aligned with the Ottawa Senators because, that's Ryan Reynolds' hockey team. That's very cool. So, I don't know anybody who would disagree with the concept of Ryan Reynolds being part of the ownership picture moving forward. Yeah,
I just imagine the marketing alone, Steve. I mean, all you have to do is have this guy, I don't know, put together some of the video. He's got that quick wit, that great sarcasm about him. I don't know, maybe he could even use the Deadpool character. You're talking Sens colors with the Deadpool character. I mean, from a marketing perspective alone, I don't care how minority his ownership would be. This would be a huge win for the Ottawa Senators organization and this community.
Yeah, it would set the table for the majority shareholder, as he said on the Tonight Show, the sugar daddy with the deep pockets. It would certainly set the table for whoever that may be, and he's already got a bunch of friends who have deep pockets that partner with him in a lot of his business ventures. So, he might bring with him to the table some big name, and I think Ryan Reynolds would just whether you're talking about the long-term future of the franchise or the immediate success of the next owner, he's a win across the board.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Steve. I could talk to you for the next 2 hours, but I gotta let you go. Thanks so much for joining us, Steve. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek.
All right, take care. That's Steve Warren, veteran Ottawa sports broadcaster and host of the Sens Nation podcast. I'm Derek Fage, filling in for Sam Laprade, and you're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM.
On the next episode of Simply Cooking by Un Chef, prendiamo un café. Let's grab a coffee and a sweet treat, a tiramisu. Salut!
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
It's closing time, and you stayed out longer than you planned. So now you can't drive, and the buses have stopped running. You could always call your girlfriend. Or maybe your roommate? What about your best friend? You could just dial 1-888-TAXI-GUY or use the Taxi Guy app. The call and the app are free, and they both connect you to a local cab company to bring you home safely. Visit arrivealive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive, drive sober.
After a 2-year hiatus, we are back with brand new episodes of Celebrate Ottawa starting this fall. We showcase remarkable people highlighting the city's diversity in arts, culture, sports, and nature. We will show you features that will entertain you and will even teach you new things. Join me, your host, Lila Grind, as we explore and celebrate Ottawa.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hey, this is Dominique Orley. I'm part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
One for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, November 8th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it is 3 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Bargaining has resumed between the Ford government and CUPE, the union representing 55,000 education support workers in this province. The Premier says he is presenting an improved offer to the union, particularly for lower-income workers. Now, the Premier also cautions that any agreement with the education workers will have an impact on the 4 major teachers' contracts. Also in bargaining, and increases for CUPE could lead to tens of billions of dollars for increases to the teachers, and he needs to watch Ontario's bottom line. The Emergencies Act inquiry continues today, this time with a testimony from protesters who took part in the trucker convoy protest and border blockades last winter. Fort Macleod, Alberta Councillor Marco Van Huygenbos is facing charges of mischief for his role in the protest at Coots, Alberta. Ontario Provincial Police Officer Dana Early is also set to take the stand after taking part in the protest in Windsor, Ontario. And another professional golf event is coming to Ottawa. PGA Tour Canada says the Commissioner's Ottawa Open will be back next summer. The 72-hole medal play event is scheduled for July 17 to 23rd at the Eagle Creek Golf Club on Don Robin Road. City News time is 10:33. I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. Derek Fage here, filling in for Sam Laprade this week. Sam is off, focusing on her other role at the Legion National Foundation. She's assisting veterans and their families during this remembrance period. And the good news is Sam will actually be returning to her own show. Sam Laprade joining us at 10:45 to talk about the great work that she is doing while she is away this week. Of course, we are keeping you up to date on what's happening between CUPE and the Ford government. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, with a press conference this morning, says his government will present an improved offer when bargaining resumes with CUPE, who represents 55,000 education workers back on the job after a walkout that closed schools across the province. Speaking at that news conference a little earlier today, Doug Ford declined to provide any specific details about the government's proposal, but said the offer would be especially good for lower income workers. Joining me to talk more about this topic, I am joined by Carrie Lynn Poole-Cotman, Secretary Treasurer of CUPE Local 503 in Ottawa. Good morning, Carrie Lynn.
Good morning.
What do you make of what you heard from Premier Doug Ford this morning?
I think that there's a renewed effort to negotiate a fair deal for the education workers represented by CUPE. Certainly there was an overarching tone that what would be tabled would likely not set a pattern going forward, and trying to address the low wages in the sector, which average right now about $39,000 for those workers.
Carolyn, what do you make about this argument? We've heard this argument being put out by a number of people, in the fact that many of these workers that we're talking about are part-time, 6 hours a day, 190 some days a year. That's why we're seeing these figures of $39,000 a year on average. So low. I mean, what do you say to that argument?
What many people don't know is that the support staff that work in the school board actually face a series of layoffs throughout the year. So they're often laid off over the Christmas holiday, they're laid off over March break, and they are laid off over the summer. Also, being scheduled only 6 hours per week does result in part-time status, which has pension and benefit implications as well. So you can imagine, as a education worker who's employed for 10 months of the year, when facing lower hourly wages, it's very difficult. And relying on employment insurance to fill those gaps is real poverty wages as well. So I think it's important to lift up the fact that these workers have faced 10 years of inadequate increases that did not meet inflation, and now we're in a certain economic moment where that is becoming unsustainable, and the reliance on food banks and not being able to, work at a living wage is a real challenge.
Carrie Lynn, what about a push for making these workers full-time? Has that been brought to the table at all?
I can't speak to specifically what the proposals are.
Okay.
The 6 hours a day and making more staff permanent is generally a bargaining issue that CUPE tries to advance. It improves the working conditions and the lives of CUPE members who work in this very important sector. And bargaining has resumed and will play out, and I'm sure that the bargaining team will be advancing their members' desires.
Do you see any movement on CUPE's end? With this 11.7%, Doug Ford saying this morning that he's made an improved offer. It may not, obviously, I don't think it's going to meet that demand of 11.7%. Do you see any movement on CUPE's side?
I think people don't understand the fact that this bargaining team has actually put forward a flat rate proposal, which some fancy math has resonated this into a percentage increase. I am sure, based on my conversation early this morning with OSBCU President Laura Walton, that she is at the table with her team with open hearts and open minds, with the willingness to negotiate a fair contract for their members.
Carrie Lynn, yeah, I'm glad you brought up that flat rate, because I don't think it's been talked about enough. You hear it here and there in the media, but it's a great opportunity for us to bring it to our listeners. Maybe you can just describe, what you mean by that flat rate, and maybe some of the confusion around the, talking percentages.
Right. So there are education workers who are 10-month employees who make a low rate of pay over a calendar year. And then there are some of the members in OSBCU who work 12 months of the year and may be at a bit of a higher rate. In order to have some internal equity when it comes to negotiating an increase, a flat rate model actually raises the floor for the lowest paid workers as well as the highest paid workers so that that gap in income does not become wider. So the initial request was a toonie, a loonie, and a quarter on the hourly rate of all workers in OSBCU. So that was the starting position. Math was done to translate that into a percentage, not by this bargaining team, but actually by the government. And so now I assume, based on conversations that I have had, that the emphasis on moving forward with a flat rate to deal with the lowest paid workers is really important.
Carolyn, let's talk about the perspective of unions in general and what rescinding Bill 28, rescinding the notwithstanding clause, and showing this incredible amount of support that we saw from unions across the board in this country, not even just in this province. What did that mean for union workers in general across the country, do you think, with what's happened over the last 24 hours?
Well, I would even say, since the bill was introduced, what that means for unions across this country is a restoration of our rights to fair collective bargaining, which is a protected ground under the Charts of Rights and Freedoms. It is a significant win for this bill to be repealed. We do not want to be the start of a ripple effect across this country where workers' rights are stripped to collective bargaining. And the solidarity that was demonstrated across this country as well as in this province, combined with the public support for these low-paid education workers, whether it was parents, our allies in the labor movement, progressive groups, it certainly did cause the government to blink and to make a significant pivot, which is a big win for the labor movement.
CUPE has stated that, a strike remains on the table. Why do you think, as a group, they've decided to leave that on the table?
Well, we're back to regular bargaining. So once the bill is repealed, they're at the table. They have every tool available to them. There is a 5-day notice period that needs to be served as per the act that they bargain in. And it's an important signal that while there were grand gestures yesterday, that worker power is building. This group is activated. It has the support and the allies of the broader labor movement, as well as community groups, parents, students, and it's an important tool. And it's one that we should not put in the toolbox and retire.
Right. You mentioned, the support from parents. I'd just like to touch on that a little bit more and expand on that. What kind of support have you seen? I mean, you sounded very encouraged when you mentioned parents in particular.
I think it's important to note, and Laura has spoken about this quite extensively, is that during the pandemic, these workers were still in schools. These workers were still providing supports to children with exceptionalities that require additional supports to be in a fully inclusive learning environment. In a post-pandemic recovery, the schools are not functioning the way in which they were pre-pandemic. Parents who have children in the school system know that the supports need to be enhanced, invested in order to actually have a recovery for student learning, as well as the ongoing full inclusivity of children in the school system. So, parents are attuned. And we should not forget the fact that there have been significant cash transfer payments to students for them to procure their own services that are inadequate, and actually privatization. So what we need to do is we need to get money invested into the school system to secure these services that OSBCU members deliver each and every day in order for our school system, our public school system, to be strengthened.
Carrie Lynn, just lastly, on that side of encouraged, I wonder, you as a group as well, CUPE, perhaps encouraged by what you heard from, members of the federal government, including the Prime Minister himself, with the use of the notwithstanding clause and being, very disappointed to see it being used in this manner.
I think the best way to describe it is the way that Laura has spoken about it, of using a sledgehammer or the nuclear option to put in a push pin, and preemptively using the notwithstanding clause to end a labor disruption that hadn't even started is a huge overreach of constitutional and charter rights. So it is encouraging that this did reach the national level and that there were comments from elected officials to support the labor movement. And as we go forward, hopefully it will send a message that other premiers across this province, and including Doug Ford here in Ontario, will not be so swift to move to the nuclear option. There are many other tools in a government's toolbox in order to move forward labor negotiation issues.
Carrie Lynn, really appreciate you spending time and sharing your perspective with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's Carrie Lynn Poole-Cottenham, Secretary-Treasurer of CUPE Local 503 in Ottawa. You're tuned into the Sam Laprade Show, and guess what? Our next guest is Sam Laprade. We're going to find out about the great work Sam's doing while she is off this week. This is Derek Fage filling in for Sam Laprade. We'll be right back after this.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News
101.1 FM and 1310.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
We can be hurt. We can be bruised. We can be broken. Slowed down, confused, and even numbed. But we can't be defeated. We're built on a foundation that's strong, our mission unwavering, and together we'll beat as one.
On Tuesday's Daytime Ottawa, Stephen Bechta joins us on the show. He's going to be talking about the return of Dinner in a Box, raising funds for a great cause, the Snowsuit Fund, and you know how much we love the theatre on the show. Orpheus Musical Theatre will be back to tell us about their latest production. It will be the first production since the pandemic began, and the Outdoor Christmas Craft Show is back. We'll give you some great examples of what you can purchase ahead of the holiday season.
Hi, I'm Meg from AIM Fitness, and I'm here with my buddy Fit Finley. Join us every week for Fit Over 50. We'll take you through some low-impact and high-intensity workouts designed to improve your strength and your balance. All you'll need is a resistance band, some light hand weights, and also your water bottle and a sturdy chair. Tune in right here on Rogers TV and let us be part of your weekly routine.
I am Audrey. And I'm Leah. Leah inspired me to play hockey. The War Amps has helped me by giving me my devices I need to play hockey.
Audrey has an amputation similar to mine.
What does yours do? The stick clicks in it.
My device from the War Amps allows me to shoot a lot better. It rotates like a wrist, which helps a lot with shooting and stick handling.
When I score a goal, I feel really happy.
the way I kill. My skill sharpened, cause I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, a.k.a. your favorite light skin. And you're going to check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911, call it in. Me, I murder every...
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. Derek Fage here, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in for Sam. And as I mentioned earlier on in the show, Sam is off this week as she focuses on her other role at the Legion National Foundation. And guess what? Sam Laprade, the host of the Sam Laprade Show, joining us on the show right now to talk about the great work that she's doing this week. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, Derek.
Great to have you. Yeah, so let's talk about this. I know this is something you're incredibly passionate about, Sam. You've been working with the Legion National Foundation for many years now. Tell us about your role.
So I'm really honored to be the National Director of Development for the Legion National Foundation, which allows me to, really connect with veterans and their families, and that's obviously a big honor, especially this time of year. And it's been, very, very special for me to do that. I have been with them, I think, going on 5 years now, and it's been wonderful to be able to raise money and give back to, veterans across the country.
So, Sammy, tell us about your specific role then with the foundation.
So basically, it's a fundraising role. You know me in fundraising, Derek.
Of course, yes.
So much. So it's basically, connecting with donors, corporations, individual people, Canadians that want to give back to veterans, and then we disperse that money. So I'm part of that process with the board. We have a volunteer board of directors that make those decisions, but I do help them do that. And it's an honor to do that every day. So basically, obviously I'm normally on radio, like you mentioned, every day. But this is something I do when I'm not on the air.
Sam, there are many challenges that our veterans face and shouldn't have to face. What are some of those challenges that the foundation helps raise money for?
Yeah, we really focus on veterans' health and wellness. We also focus on pilgrimages, obviously going back to France and to Europe. We also focus on the remembrance contests and an opportunity to also give scholarships and bursaries. So that's, a big role that I play, helping the board make those big decisions. We've dispersed hundreds of thousands of dollars across the country, including to places like Veterans House here in the capital, which obviously helps veterans that are homeless. So veterans who face homelessness, veterans who are struggling with mental health, those types of issues are top of mind for our board.
And if I remember correctly, Sam, you have visited Veterans House.
I have.
Yeah, tell me about that. Yeah, tell me about that experience.
Suzanne Lee and her group have done a great job. I mean, that's, it's so ironic back to be on the Rockcliffe base. And it's an opportunity to really learn about people that have served this country, sacrificed, and they come back and they're changed people, Derek. You and I have talked about that with a number of guests over the years. And sometimes people come back from serving and they've lost their family, they've, suffering from various mental illness, and they find themselves on the street. And no one should be on the street, don't get me wrong. But when we see people that have served this country living in shelters, it's obviously not acceptable. So Veterans House has done a wonderful job of creating a supportive space for them. So I did visit and be able to present a check with our board last year for $200,000.
Nice. Wow. Sam, you did a tremendous job highlighting Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report, and you went over all of those pieces of the report. You made it, you made it a really special. And today is National Aboriginal Veterans Day here in Canada. Maybe you could just speak quickly on the importance of recognizing the contributions of Aboriginal veterans.
Well, I'll be honest, it took us a long time to do that as Canadians, too long. And so it is a special day today, and certainly it is recognized by the Royal Canadian Legion and the Legion National Foundation of being a very special day. And recognizing the sacrifices, and of everyone that served, but particularly today taking a nod to people that served this country and didn't get a lot of recognition in many ways, put their hand up and said that they would serve and really didn't get any sort of recognition for doing so. So we wanted to recognize that today. We have some social media posts and those types of things about that today. But really, it's to sit on our hearts today that people have served this country, and especially people that are Indigenous. We're thinking about them today. That friends and family of those fallen as well.
I think one of the amazing, innovative things that we've seen through the foundation, the Legion itself, is really looking towards technology and figuring out a way to use technology, and they've done an amazing job, and I know you've been a part of that as well, and that's the Digital Poppy campaign and the ability to create your digital poppy. Talk a little bit about that, Sam.
Yeah, I worked on that for many, many years. My role has shifted a little bit, so I'm certainly supporting colleagues working on that this year. So they're doing a great job on that. But really, the purpose of the Digital Poppy is to find a unique way to recognize, like you and I would wear a poppy on our lapel, is to wear that digital poppy on your electronic signature. So it would be on your email, or whether that would be on your social media, which we encourage you to share and dedicate those. I always dedicate one to my grandfather, and those are opportunities for us to really reflect in a like you mentioned, sort of a new technology way. Certainly in 2020, it became something that Canadians really relied on, to be honest, finding unique ways to remember the fallen. Yeah. So we had a very, very successful, we have had a successful campaign every year, but we really noticed in 2020, of course, as we were all, staying safe in our homes, that we were trying to find unique ways to do that. So the team is doing a great job this year, and I'm just so proud to be part of the team.
Yeah, as you should be, Sam. Sam, thanks so much for joining us on your show, the Sam Laprade Show.
It's my honor. Thank you so much. Thanks for filling in, Derek.
Hey, my pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Of course, Sam Laprade, host of the Sam Laprade Show. Before we go to break, there's just one thing I wanted to mention as well. This is really cool, especially for young people. I found this on the Legion National Foundation's website. So the Legion National Foundation and Fortnite, the video game, Fortnite, they've created a custom Fortnite island. Listen to this, where players could take time away from their battles to honor Canada's fallen. So players on Remembrance Island, they experience First World War trenches, D-Day beaches, a Canadian military cemetery, and the Vimy Ridge Memorial Cenotaph. So there's no fighting, there's no damage or weapons, only the opportunity for remembrance. So players will discover 30 information plaques and follow the poppies to a memorial cenotaph. On November 11th, so if you're a player, are you young or old, on November 11th, you visit Remembrance Island in Fortnite's creative mode using the island code. Now and you can find this on the website, but you can use the island code 1568-8363-9044. I think this is an amazing way to reach young people. And as I said, I know people, in their 40s that are playing Fortnite, in their 50s. But I just say, we talked about innovation with Sam and the Digital Poppy. This is an incredible way. As I said, no fighting, no damage. It's an opportunity for remembrance. So again, visit the Legion National Foundation's website to find out more information on that. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Derek Fage, and you're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
On the next episode of Simply Cooking by Un Chef, prendiamo un café. Let's grab a coffee and a sweet treat, a tiramisu. Salut!
It isn't the heavy trays that make the job difficult. or the fast pace you need to keep up. It's not working another double because someone called in sick. What makes the job tough is the moment you realize a customer has had enough and you have to make that decision not to overserve. Refusing service isn't personal, it's the law. We know it's not easy, but we're counting on you to keep us all safe. Thank you, servers, for doing the tough job.
Hi, I'm Julian Armour from Music and Beyond. Join us for a new show this spring on Rogers called Music and Beyond Presents.
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hey, this is Dominique Orley. I'm a part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
Is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, November 8th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa and in Smith Falls, it is 3 degrees, and here's just making news in Ottawa and the Valley. As the province and the union representing education workers get back to the bargaining table today, the Premier is promising an improved offer, saying he is willing to dish out more money to the lowest income earners. City News Queen's Park reporter Richard Southern joins us with the latest from a softened Dogford.
Well, it was a kinder, gentler premier that emerged today. Ford thanked CUPE for taking his offer yesterday and ending the strike. And as the two sides sit back down at the bargaining table today, Ford said he's offering more money for CUPE. He didn't get into details, though, but said he's heard the will of Ontarians.
The pulse out there is everyone's saying the same thing. Don't worry about the guys making $100,000. Worry about the people that are low-income workers. And I listen to the people. I'm never shy, and I think I've proved it over the last 4.5 years. If I have to change my mind, so be it.
When it comes to Ford's previous threat to use the notwithstanding clause, he called that not a sledgehammer, but a, quote, tool. The premier was also asked why he wasn't in his seat last Thursday to vote on Bill 28.
I was probably out running around. I can't remember the exact timing.
The government says it'll repeal that Bill 28 on Monday when the House reconvenes, but the NDP is calling on the premier to bring MPPs back today and pass the legislation. Richard Southern, City News.
And the local school board says it is optimistic that the Ford government and CUPE can come to an agreement. This is, as you just heard, Premier Doug Ford says his government is making an improved offer to CUPE. Tom D. Amico is the Director of Education at the Ottawa Catholic District School Board.
We are certainly hopeful that they'll come to a settlement and that it's fairly negotiated. So we basically, as a school board, have some tempered optimism that we know there's still work to be done, but we're hoping that our staff that are back, that want to be back and are supporting our students and our students that want to be in person, that this will continue uninterrupted.
And Ford government and CUPE are back at the bargaining table today. With the weather forecast for Ottawa and the Valley, here is City News meteorologist Jill Taylor.
The gusty wind will settle down as we work through the day. It's quite brisk this morning. Lots of sunshine overall today, and the guaranteed high 8 degrees. The average high, though, 7. Tonight, clear and down to -4. And tomorrow, sunshine, the high near 10. Warmer for Thursday and Friday. For today, the guaranteed high 8.
The Public Order Emergency Commission inquiry is underway with OPP officer Dana Early giving testimony about her role in ending the Windsor, Ontario protest. Early helped coordinate the police response to clear the blockade at the Windsor-Detroit Ambassador Bridge. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act on February 14th, giving police a set of temporary and extraordinary powers to clear blockades and remove protesters from border crossings. Now, the Commission is evaluating the government's decision to invoke the act. The Ottawa Food Bank's push to the holidays has begun. The annual campaign calls on groups, sport leagues, workplaces, and others to collect money and food for area families in need. CEO Rachel Wilson tells City News the holiday campaign is the biggest of the year, which raises almost 70% of the money they collect every year. More information and a link to the food bank is at ottawa.citynews.ca. I am Damilola Unime. And for news anytime, you can follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. Derek Fage here, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in for Sam. As a matter of fact, you can catch me on Daytime. Today at 2 p.m., we're live, 2 to 3 p.m. So I got to take off here from the station, get all the way down to Westboro at Rogers TV. And if you can't tune in at 2 p.m., we repeat at 6 and 11 p.m. each day as well. And something we talk about often on Daytime and certainly here on City News, and that's road safety. Safer roads for everybody involved. Listen, yesterday we talked to the Safety Council of Ottawa. Jamie Kwong joined us on the show. Last week, within a 48-hour period, we had 5 pedestrians hit, serious injuries, resulting in serious injuries. Unfortunately, 1 death as well. A 70-year-old man passed away. In particular, today we're going to be talking about cycling safety, keeping an eye out for our cyclists. And as Jamie Kwong said yesterday, this back and forth, this conflict between cyclists and automobile motorists, it's unnecessary. So many of us are both cyclists and motorists, and I think we have to have a better understanding of that. We certainly heard a lot about cycling, bike paths during the municipal election campaign, and that's why we wanted to bring on John Wembombo, program coordinator with Safer Roads Ottawa. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure, John. And let's first of all talk about Safer Roads Ottawa and the role that Safer Roads Ottawa plays here in our community.
Yes, so the Safer Roads Ottawa program is one of the groups at the City of Ottawa that is responsible for community outreach, engagement, and education when it comes to road safety.
And John, you have a number of different awareness campaigns, intersection safety, speed reduction, keeping an eye out for motorcycles, to leave the phone alone. You can take the pledge, be safe, be seen. Let's talk specifically, though, about cyclists and what cyclists need to do, and we'll get to motorists as well and the responsibilities they have. But what advice can you give to cyclists in order to, make sure they have a safe commute wherever they're going?
Right. So speaking with cyclists, increasing your visibility helps motorists and other road users to see you sooner and giving them more time to react. So basically having proper lighting on your bicycle, like a white front light and a rear red light, as well as a working bell or horn on your bicycle helps a lot.
There's another thing that I found really interesting when I'm on the website for Safer Roads Ottawa was the fact, and I didn't even realize, I almost feel guilty that I didn't realize this, but we have what's called Pathway Patrol Volunteers. Can you talk a little bit about that program?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Pathway Patrol volunteers are basically our ambassadors who are out on the path, making sure that all the pathway users are using the pathway safely. So making sure also that they report hazards on either NCC paths or City of Ottawa paths. So it's really hard to miss them. They're out there. There are eyes on the path, and just making sure that everybody enjoys our path in a safe manner.
What kind of requirements are there for a pathway patroller if people are interested, someone listening in?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone can really join the Pathway Patrol, whether you like cycling, walking, or rollerblading, as long as you're over the age of 18 years old, and we'll just be also doing a background check, and then you're good to go, and we'll also get you to do first aid training, and after that it's really smooth sailing. And what we would just require is that volunteers commit at least 6 hours a month for volunteering. Not only do you have to patrol the paths, you can also volunteer your time at some of our community events that Safer Roads does out there, and just speak to safe cycling or pedestrian safety and so forth and so on.
Well, speaking of events, you have Lights on Bikes event happening today. Tell us about that.
That's correct, yeah. So for those who are not aware, Lights on Bikes event is an annual event organized by the Safer Roads Auto program and various community partners to raise awareness and encourage cyclists to light themselves up while cycling at dawn, dusk, or in the early evening hours and at night. And also the other focus of this event is to raise awareness of the requirements for cyclists to have the appropriate lights and horns on their bicycles. So basically, we will be at the western entrance of the Corktown Footbridge, so on the Rideau Canal Western Pathway. And for those who are familiar with the downtown area, we'll be at the intersection of Somerset West and Queen Elizabeth Driveway. It's going to be hard to miss us, so we'll be there just interacting with cyclists who do not have lights on their bicycle. We'll be providing them with a free set of bike lights, as well as other reflectors that we'll have handy for pedestrians and anybody who is really willing to be visible out there when they're walking.
Oh, what a great initiative, John. And we did talk about, cyclists as far as their safety perspective goes and what they should be, doing and looking out for. That's what you're discussing tonight. But on, as far as, motorists are concerned, let's talk a little bit about what we can do better as motorists out there to keep, our cycling community safe.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And really what I want, the takeaway really from this event and just in general is that we have to keep in mind that road safety is everyone's responsibility. We need to take an active role in our safety when we're out on the roads. And usually what I say to people is that there's just a simple approach that we can all take, is to think safety and act safely. So basically for motorists who are out there, just be vigilant when you're coming to an interaction with other road users. And this could be just planning your trip ahead and making sure that you are giving yourself enough time to react when you come in interaction with other road users.
John, outside of tonight's event, Lights on Bikes, I understand that community associations, the gatherings, that they can also bring Safer Roads Ottawa to come and speak and talk about these, the Safer Roads mandate that you have?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So community associations, other groups as well, not just community associations, are welcome to reach us at sro@ottawa.ca if they needed us to come in and do a presentation. And usually what we do is we will also bring in safety gear that we can distribute to the residents as well. Just all in all is to make sure that everyone is visible out there and just keeping them safe. So back to the Lights on Bike event tonight, we'll be at the Corktown Footbridge from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. there. If you're around in the neighborhood or around the area, just come by and we'll get you up with a safety gear.
Excellent. Really appreciate your time today, John. Thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. That's John Wambombo, Program Coordinator with Safety Roads Ottawa. And really, want to encourage you to visit their website. As I said off the top, they have a number of awareness campaigns. Really excellent awareness campaigns. They have stop sign intersection safety campaign, speed reduction, speeding costs you. Keep an eye out for motorcycles campaign, leave the phone alone. You can take the pledge online, be safe, be seen, which John was just talking about, so important as a cyclist. And even with Ottawa Safety Council yesterday, Jamie Kwong talking about the fact when you're even out walking as a pedestrian, especially as, in the evenings, right? It gets darker in the evenings, making sure people can see you out there, lighting up your pets as well, right? Certainly a lot of people doing that. They also have a campaign on wildlife vehicle collision prevention. We see more and more of that as we get closer to our winter months. A couple of more campaigns, the slow down for us, and then the impaired driving is a leading factor in fatal or major injuries on Ottawa roads. So all of those campaigns available at ottawa.ca/parking, roads, and travel. So you can really just look up Safer Roads Ottawa, the campaign itself, and then for the volunteer opportunity, the Pathway Patrol, all of that information is available as well to become a Pathway Patrollers. And if you're wondering, that you're not necessarily comfortable doing something like this on your own, one of the criteria, one of the requirements is patrols must be with a minimum of 2 people. So you wouldn't be out there by yourself doing it. I mean, first aid and CPR training is a must as well. And then road safety in your community, as John mentioned. You can find out more how you can bring Safer Roads Ottawa to your community organization. Don't go away. Lots still coming up here on the Sam Laprade Show. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about housing. We've heard about housing was one of the top priorities during our municipal campaign. We heard from all of our mayoral candidates, all of our city council candidates, how important it is. And now we have new legislation. More homes legislation. The province could possibly knock down municipal efforts to create and protect affordable housing, is what some people are saying. But we're going to get perspective from Dean Tester, a housing advocate with the local group Make Housing Affordable. That's coming up after the break. This is Derek Fage, filling in for Sam Laprade. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
I'm Nicole Martin, the proud ambassador for the Comfort Bear program. Comfort Bears provide these cuddly bears to local children who are terminally ill, facing trauma, or battling a serious illness. Every $20 donation will place a Comfort Bear into the loving arms of a child involved in our program. It is our hope to distribute 1,000 bears in 2022. Please join us and provide comfort to kids in their time of need.
My mother said we had to leave home. The communists were going to take my father away. If my parents were afraid, they didn't show us. But we would never forget our escape from Vietnam. We were lost.
What was your job in Vietnam? University professor.
We had no home.
Do you have any family in Canada? No, sir.
Nobody wanted us.
Welcome to Canada.
Canada chose us.
Canadians open their borders, their homes, and their hearts to more than 100,000 refugees fleeing persecution after the Vietnam War.
We were home.
From coast to coast, all across Canada, there's something very special going on. It's time to show your support. Time to spread the word. Time to demonstrate your commitment to safe and sober driving. Join thousands of Canadians and tie a ribbon on something or someone you love. And take the time to have a real conversation about impaired driving. Mad Project Red Ribbon. Tie it, wear it, show it, share it, live it. Find out more at mad.ca.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
That's the way I kill my skill sharpen, because I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, a.k.a. your favorite light skin, and you're going to check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911, call it in. Me, I murder every
Laprade Show continues on City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. Derek Fage, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in for Sam this week. Sam will be back on Monday. A lot of interesting topics. I mean, if you're in the business of news, well, there's always something going on. Now we're going to talk about the new More Homes legislation, I should say. The new More Homes legislation. I've heard the pros and cons from many different people. Here to tell us his perspective is Dean Tester, housing advocate with the local group Make Housing Affordable. Good morning, Dean.
Good morning.
Wonderful to have you, Dean, because we want to get all different perspectives. The Ottawa Citizen had an article earlier this week. More homes built faster. Everybody seems to be talking about this or a different perspective. Love to have you give your perspective, Dean. What do you think? What does your organization make of this?
Well, I'd say first that overall, I'm very happy with the bill. I mean, okay. Ottawa and the province in general has an urgent need to build homes. We have a massive housing shortage in this city. We're about 70,000 homes short of what an average G7 city would have for our population. So we're starting from way behind. The province has said we have to build 150,000 homes in the next 10 years. That'll make a huge difference in terms of the types of homes available, the cost of homes, and it'll make our city more affordable, because what's happening right now, we don't have enough homes here. People can't afford to live in the city. Young families like mine are looking at places like Carleton Place and Arnprior and leaving the city, and that's not good for the city of Ottawa.
For those that aren't familiar with your organization, Make Housing Affordable, tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background.
Yeah, so I got involved with housing advocacy about a year ago. I had just gotten married to my wife, and we started looking at, how can we afford a home? How can we start a family? And I got to tell you, everybody my age is going through the same thing. We're all struggling with this. If we're not fortunate enough to have a big down payment handed down to us by our family, a lot of us are just feeling totally hopeless in the housing market. And two, I'm tired of watching my friends move away from the city because they can't afford to live here anymore. And this is just something that came up over and over and over again in every conversation I had with friends. So we started this group. I found a lot of support across the community. We've got about 200 volunteers right now in our community, and we're doing things like showing up to city council meetings and presenting and asking the city to build more homes. We just put together a petition yesterday that we're submitting to city council in favor of a 3-home development that's being debated at city council tomorrow. I can't believe our entire city council has to vote to approve what's basically a 3-unit townhouse in Nepean tomorrow. This is just madness to me when we have this housing shortage. So that's the type of work we're doing right now. Obviously, as you know, there are different affordable housing advocates out there. And I'm just going to read a quote from this Ottawa Citizen article I mentioned off the top. Organizations like Acorn are speaking out on this. They're calling this the most consequential, far-reaching piece of housing legislation and regulatory change in Ontario in recent memory, and its contents threaten to undo years of work by affordable housing advocates and the cities who've acted in line with their calls to do more for renters and lower-income people facing a housing market hostile to their needs. And I know you feel that there is perhaps a lot of misunderstanding from these well-intentioned groups. Tell me your thoughts on, hearing that quote and what you think some of the misunderstandings are. Yeah, so I think Acorn does a great job lobbying for renters' rights, and I hope they continue to do that excellent work. So what the province is doing, there's 2 pieces here that are, a group like Acorn would call controversial. One is the removal of
Ottawa's rental replacement bylaw, which they had put into the new official plan. The reason why the province did that is because they're passing a province-wide rental replacement plan. So I don't know what the details of that will be yet. I don't know if it will be better or worse than what the City of Ottawa had proposed. I've contacted the province and I told them, we really want to see stronger protections for renters, not weaker protections. So if that's not the way the province goes, I'll be right there with Acorn protesting this. But what I would say is it is a bit of a misunderstanding to say that they've removed these renters' protections. Well, no, they're bringing in their own set, and we don't know what they look like yet. So we're waiting to see what happens there. And then the other piece of this is inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is the idea that we will force developers to pay for a certain percentage of affordable units in new condos near transit buildings, for example. And in practice, we know developers are not providers of social housing. They desire to make money. They are not trying to provide a social good for us. They just pass on those costs, right? Any tax that gets put on to developers, they pass on to first-time home buyers and renters who are living in these buildings. So what I would say instead, inclusionary zoning is a very minor tool. It's not a magic wand solution. What we actually need to do is invest tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars into affordable housing in this city, because I'll tell you, the backlogs, I live right next to affordable housing out in Barrhaven. There's a 10-year wait list to get into the affordable housing near us. And that's awful, right? Can you imagine being someone in desperate need of a home, barely able to make ends meet, living out of your car or something else, and being told you have to wait 10 years to get into a unit? And that's horrible. And the units that we do have, there's a repair backlog. These units, a lot of them are in dire straits. So I would say instead of tinkering at the edges, instead of, trying to, change regulations and raise taxes and force developers to pay, that's a bit of a fantasy. We actually just need every level of government to start putting money towards this. It's an urgent need. There's no tinkering at the edges. We need to get it done.
And I think the other thing that I've heard, if I recall, it was John Tory had mentioned this, and he's warning that Doug Ford's new housing plan could cost Toronto $200 million a year, because there is, this idea of cutting development fees, right, in order to spur development of more affordable housing. So, just your thoughts on that. If you want, as you said, these developers are in the business of making money. If you want to make it more attractive to build more affordable housing, maybe this is the way to go. But then there's the concern that taxpayers are going to foot the bill from the loss of the fees of the developers. Thoughts on that, Dean?
Yeah, and so what the Ford government is doing is they're removing development charges, but only on affordable, nonprofit social housing. So that's, the people who desperately need a roof over their head. Well, they don't have to pay an extra, 10 or 15% upfront in development charges. So to me, that's a change that makes sense. They're not removing development charges on single-family homes, on greenfield developments. They're not, removing development charges for, $500,000 condos. They're removing development charges for people who are in most desperate need. So I think that's a positive change. I think the city's vastly overestimating how much money they get from that type of development charge. Because quite frankly, we don't build enough affordable housing in the city. We build almost nothing. And that's the problem, right? We need to build more affordable housing. We need support for deeply affordable housing. We need money to go towards social housing. This is a problem with, a lot of folks on city council. Unfortunately, they seem to think that there's just some magic way we're going to make developers just pay more and not not have any profits. They don't operate that way. They are in the business of making money. They are not going to give handouts. Social housing is a social good. The entire city should pay for it. The provincial government should step up and help pay for it, and the federal government should help pay for it. And just to give some historical context on this, before the 1990s, social housing in Canada, we didn't have these wait lists, we didn't have these backlogs because it was almost entirely funded by the federal government. The federal government under Jean Chrétien came in and gutted that funding as part of, they made a lot of cuts in that time to get the budget back to balance. And nobody's really fixed that. Nothing has changed since then. And so we've had, 20 plus years of just underfunding of this critical infrastructure for people who need affordable housing. So we need to fix that.
Dean, really appreciate getting your perspective on this today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for chatting.
It's my pleasure. That's Dean Tester, housing advocate with the local group Make Housing Affordable. You can find out more at makehousingaffordable.ca. This is Derek Fage filling in on the Sam Laprade Show. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
After a night out with your friends, there's always options for getting home safely. You could call your BFF, your mom or dad, whoever you can count on for a safe ride home. You could call your favorite cab company or 1-888 taxi guy. Or you could use the Arrive Alive smartphone app to help you choose your ride. Be it a friend, transit, or taxi, getting home safely is app easy. Now available for iOS and Android devices. Visit arrivealive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive, drive sober.
Once upon a time, in a nursery rhyme, there were 3 bears. 1, 2, 3 bears. And they went a-walking in the cool woods a-talking.
Rogers TV invites you to let your imagination roam as we present Ottawa storytellers. Each week, we'll present a collection of original creative stories and inspirations for children of all ages. Join us for Ottawa Storytellers on Rogers TV.
On the next episode of Simply Cooking by Un Chef, prendiamo un café. Let's grab a coffee and a sweet treat, a tiramisu. Salut!
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, November 8th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa and in Smith Falls, mainly sunny 4 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford says provincial negotiators are providing the union for 55,000 education workers with an improved offer. The two sides are back at the bargaining table today, and QP announced it would take down the strike sites that kept kids out of school on Friday and Monday after the Ford government announced it would rescind a law that imposed a contract on the workers. QP says it is technically still in a legal strike position, but will now instead focus on renewed bargaining efforts. And another professional golf event is coming to Ottawa. PGA Tour Canada says the Commissioner's Ottawa Open will be back next summer. The 72-hole medal play event is scheduled for July 17 to 23 at the Eagle Creek Golf Club on Don Robin Road. Cancer researchers have found that patients are living longer thanks to better detection and treatment. but worry that the rising case numbers and gaps in data could undermine those gains. The Canadian Cancer Society released a report this morning that found more than 1.5 million people in Canada were diagnosed with cancer in the 25 years leading up to January 2018. And they're calling for more investment in healthcare and disease management as they predict an aging, sicker population with further strain on an already stretched system. City News time is 11:33. I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. Derek Fage here, filling in this week for Sam. I'm the host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV. Well, as I said earlier on the show, lots of news, lots of things to talk about. Certainly, Ontario Premier Doug Ford's decision to invoke the notwithstanding clause for the second time has prompted a public debate that's really, cuts right into the heart of the Constitution. At the center of the debate is whether the Charter of Rights and Freedoms can still be said to exist in practice when some premiers appear eager to normalize the use of the Charter's Section 33, which allows governments to temporarily override other sections of that document. And here to answer some more questions. So what is the notwithstanding clause? Why do we have it? Did the Ford government use the clause properly? We are joined by Howard Levitt, senior partner at Levitt Chic LLP. Welcome to the show, Howard.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Delighted to be on.
It's a pleasure. Can you break it down for us a little bit more? Like, what is the notwithstanding clause for people that have heard the term over and over again, but they're not quite familiar with exactly what it is and what it means?
Well, it's really simple. It means notwithstanding the Charter, this law will still go into effect. The Charter is irrelevant. This overrides the Charter. It's the theory that Parliament or the legislature is paramount, not unelected judges. So when they put in a law and the law would violate the Charter, any government at any time can say, notwithstanding the Charter, this law will apply. That's the notwithstanding clause. And so the Charter won't apply.
Why do we have it?
Because in the constitutional bargain of the Charter, no one was allowed to let judges decide and set aside legislation like they can in the U.S. At the end of the day, Parliament had to be paramount.
Yeah, and I remember too.
People had to prevail.
Right, and I think this came about in the early '80s. The Liberal government, that was Pierre Trudeau's government, wanted Canada to have its own constitution with an entrenched Bill of Rights. But then the negotiations stalled over concerns that the proposed Charter of Rights would be too powerful. So there were a number of people, of course, including several provincial premiers at the time. They were concerned that would upset sort of the balance of power, right, between federal and provincial governments.
Well, not so much that between notwithstanding clause anyway, between courts and elected officials.
Would put too much power in the hands of the courts.
Yes.
Right. So do you think the Ford government used the clause properly in this case?
Well, they can use it for whatever they want. That's the point. That's why they're elected. And they lose. And the notwithstanding clause only applies for 5 years. It gives a chance for a new government to be elected. So it only has a 5-year term, or it would have to be enacted again with potentially a new government. They thought it was correct because they wanted to protect parents, employers, and kids who are at school. So that was their use of it. There's nothing illegitimate in it.
Right. What about on CUPE's side? What about the strike in itself? Because the notwithstanding clause was enacted, was the strike illegal?
It was illegal.
Yeah.
It was totally ballsy. They could have had $220 million a day in fines, agreed to take on the fines of the members, and that would have put them out of business. So they had to really think that either politically or otherwise they'd prevail, and they did. Effectively, except they really didn't because they were going to go on strike. Now they're not.
Right. I want to turn our attention to the Emergencies Act, the latest from the inquiry. What have you seen and heard? What are your thoughts on what you've seen in the last 48 hours at the inquiry?
I must say I've not been following it closely. It's It's not my field of law. I have my own views of it, which was that the government dramatically overreached. I think that's the views of virtually everybody. Seizing bank accounts, et cetera, for what was really a minor squabble in the scheme of things. The police could have bring in whatever you need to clear the streets, and that should have been the end of it. You don't need the War Measures Act, which it's now called the Emergency Act. It was like taking a sledgehammer to kill a mosquito.
Yeah, and Howard, I guess the argument is, from other people's perspective, is the fact that, the municipal police did nothing, the Ontario Provincial Police did nothing up to that point, the RCMP did nothing up to that point, and only after the Emergencies Act was enacted was there any movement.
But they didn't need the Emergency Act to order the police and an army, if necessary, or RCMP into action. They just didn't need it. They could have done that anyway. They just didn't do it.
Is there fault on the provincial side? I mean, because it seemed to me in particular that Doug Ford was sort of arm's length away from everything that was going on here in Ottawa.
I can't speak to what he was doing, but certainly the OPP should have been much more vigilant in putting an end to this, and they should have. The Ottawa Police, they should have. Everybody should have. But they didn't need the Emergency Act. That's the point. They had everything they did to stop it. None of that required the Emergency Act.
I want to go back to the notwithstanding clause. Do you think, does the use of this act, what do you think that means going forward? What does that tell, I guess, other unions? I mean, because, this isn't going to be the first negotiation that we've seen, education workers and healthcare workers, there's going to be another negotiation. What does this mean moving forward, do you think?
I think Ford got badly scarred.
Really?
Public opinion was against him, and I think he's going to be very, very reluctant to use it again. He's promised he'll use it again if they go on strike again, if CUPE goes on strike again, but I think he's going to be very, very careful about it. But remember, he's taken a position all along. We're here for his kids going to school, and we'll do what we have to do to let them go to school. So what he might do next time is not do that, but simply declare them an essential service, which will get them the same impact.
Howard, really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure anytime. Thank you.
All right, take care. That's Howard Levitt, senior partner at Levitt Sheik LLP. And just going back to the Emergencies Act inquiry, it's some more interesting information coming out as we continue the discussion. Some of the latest that we're hearing is Canada's intelligence agency felt that invoking the Emergencies Act would actually galvanize members of the Freedom Convoy and perhaps radicalize some towards engaging in violence. And that's according to a document that was presented before the Emergencies Act inquiry on Monday, yesterday. CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, their assessment report was made public as part of the Public Order Emergency Commission inquiry, which is, of course, reviewing the federal government's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act to clear crowds and vehicles. The report states that CSIS sat in on 3 cabinet meetings before the federal government chose to invoke the Emergencies Act. So on February 13th, the day before legislation was invoked, CSIS expressed concerns. CSIS advised that the implementation of the Emergencies Act would likely galvanize the anti-government narratives within the convoy and further the radicalization of some towards violence. So an interesting perspective to get from CSIS. They also wrote that a spike in violent rhetoric followed the declaration of a provincial state of emergency to deal with the protests blocking streets in downtown Ottawa and at the Ambassador Bridge. So even outside of the Emergencies Act, even before that, when Doug Ford declared a state of emergency, they started to see this sort of uprising. After the act was invoked, the spy agency continued to brief cabinet, the federal cabinet, about the risk of boosting violent ideologies and this radicalization through the use. So just again, another perspective, as Howard Levitt just mentioned, this could have been cleared before enacting the Emergencies Act, but nobody was acting. So that's certainly the argument. I even said that on the Rob Snow show. I think it was either last week or the week before when we were talking about the inquiry. I said to Rob, was it necessary? No, but the fact was that 3 levels of police services had not removed the protesters until the Emergencies Act was enacted. So that's, many people are giving that argument. They're saying, yeah, I agree with all of that. I agree. Was it unnecessary? Yes. However, nothing happened until the Emergencies Act was enacted. And I'm sure you have a different opinion. We're hearing from more protesters at the inquiry. We'll continue to follow it. More of the protesters that were at the blockades along the bridges, the border blockade. So we'll be hearing from more of them. But what has stood out to me so far is the ratio between the amount of citizens we heard from and city council members, Catherine McKenney and Matthew Fleury, compared to the amount of protesters we're hearing from during this inquiry. The ratio seems like about, 10 to 1 so far, so something around there. We'll be following that very closely. We're going to turn our attention coming up next to Remembrance Day. Talking about the history of Remembrance Day right here in Canada. Ben Weiss, from the Historical Society of Ottawa, will be joining us next. This is Derek Fage filling in for Sam Laprade. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hey, this is Dominique Orley. I'm a part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
On Tuesday's Daytime Ottawa, Stephen Bechta joins us on the show. He's going to be talking about the return of Dinner in a Box, raising funds for a great cause, the Snowsuit Fund, and you know how much we love the theater on the show. Orpheus Musical Theater will be back to tell us about their latest production. It will be the first production since the pandemic began, and the Outdoor Christmas Craft Show is back. We'll give you some great examples of what you can purchase ahead of the holiday season.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, some people used the A word. They called it an accident, but it wasn't. An accident implies that no one was at fault. But when someone impaired by alcohol and/or drugs chooses to drive, they're fully responsible for the crash that can result. So please, for the memory of my brother DJ and the thousands of families whose lives have been shattered by impaired drivers, let's drop the A word.
A crash caused by impaired driving is not an accident.
After a 2-year hiatus, we are back with brand new episodes of Celebrate Ottawa starting this fall. We showcase remarkable people highlighting the city's diversity in arts, culture, sports, and nature. We will show you features that will entertain you and will even teach you new things. Join me, your host, Lila Grind, as we explore and celebrate Ottawa.
Donations to the War Amps have a lasting impact on amputees. Today, your support gives them the artificial limbs and resources they need for everyday activities and learning to live with amputation. Having access to our essential programs helps amputees prepare for tomorrow on their road to independence. The War Amps is committed to improving the quality of life for Canadian amputees, but this wouldn't be possible without you. To learn how your donation helps, visit waramps.ca.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. We heard from Sam Laprade a little bit earlier on in the show today, talking about the work that she is doing while she is off this week. Sam is not on vacation. She's off this week as she focuses on her other role at the Legion National Foundation. Sam is assisting veterans and their families during this remembrance period. Should also remind everybody that today, Tuesday, November 8th, is also National Aboriginal Veterans Day here in Canada. It's been a long history of observing Remembrance Day here in this country. And here to talk about that history, we're joined by Ben Weiss from the Historical Society of Ottawa. Welcome, Ben.
Well, thank you, Derek. And like you say, with Remembrance Day this week, what an opportunity to go back to talk about the original November 11th that began this annual somber tradition of remembrance on this date. November 11th, 1918, when the news of armistice finally arrived and brought an end to what was called the Great War. Derek, it was a terrible war. It saw 65,000 Canadian soldiers lose their lives, more than have been killed in all of our other wars combined. Across the world, 20 million lives were lost. Yet you can imagine the more awful the war, the more euphoric the celebration when it finally ended. Back then, there was no internet or social media. There was no TV. Telephones were scarce, and there wasn't even radio. Most news back then remained word of mouth, and rumors had been rampant for days that the end of the war was imminent. Our Prime Minister, even though our Prime Minister, Robert Borden, had left Ottawa, he was summoned to the UK to be on hand for the good news. Right. Some were still skeptical and worried that it was all still a hoax. Many were convinced that the armistice would be announced on the 10th, which was a Sunday, but Sunday came and went. There was no word of peace. Our city's two newspapers would, of course, be the first to get the news back in those days through the wire services by telegraph.
Right.
So the Ottawa Citizen had made arrangements with Ottawa's electric companies to flash the city's lights on and off when the official news of armistice arrived. And the Ottawa Journal had made similar arrangements for the city's industrial plants to blow their whistles as soon as the good news came. So there were no iPads back there. You couldn't pick it up and check your city news website to see what was going on. People had to have other means. So when people went to bed that Sunday night, the 10th, thousands left all their lights on so they could see them flash. So you can imagine the pandemonium at 3 in the morning on November 11th when everyone's hallway lights flickered and a cacophony of factory whistles started up all along the Ottawa River. People leapt from their beds and converged downtowns en masse, a lot of them still in their pajamas. Wow. The city's fire stations and churches added to the noise with their sirens and bells. The Chateau Laurier had a big illuminated sign on the side of the building promoting buy victory bonds. So the big lit signs had buy victory bonds. A clever electrician in the hotel blanked out the first and last words, so now the sign just blazed victory. Wow. People banged pots and pans, they yelled, blew whistles, set off firecrackers, rockets, they waved flags like crazy. The whole city of Ottawa was up in the middle of the night rejoicing. Spark Street overflowed, people singing God Save the King, Oh Canada, and the Make Believe Forever. The few people who had cars drove downtown, found themselves part or even leading impromptu parades. By dawn, the jubilant crowds were pouring onto Parliament Hill. Bands were setting themselves up on the steps of the brand new Centre Block building. But the people of Ottawa weren't just celebrating the end of war, Derek. On top of all the death and destruction of the war, the great pandemic known as the Spanish flu had wiped out millions that past year. Incredibly, the death toll of the flu had actually surpassed that of the war itself. In fact, the flu ended up killing more than the death tolls of World War I and World War II combined. It is estimated that over 50,000 Canadians died from the flu, and as much as 6% of the world's population. The flu that fall had swept through Ottawa. It was its second wave. And some of this may sound familiar. The mayor and the health department had ordered all schools, theaters, public places, churches to be closed. All forms of public assembly were banned. Stores were told to close early. Railway and streetcars were sanitized regularly. There were mask mandates. At its peak, 50 were dying a day in Ottawa. In just a few short weeks, the flu killed about 1 out of every 200 residents in the city. So by November, the flu had finally begun to subside in Ottawa. So the date the mayor had announced for the lifting of all the restrictions and mandates was coincidentally November 11th.
Really?
Yeah,
so just on November fascinating.
11th, there were multiple reasons to celebrate.
Well, and you just gave me chills just, imagining as you're describing, just how jubilant everyone was and people running, outside downtown in their pajamas and, those who had cars parking, wherever they could find a spot. I mean, it just gives you an idea of how incredibly difficult that period was. And, to throw in, of course, the flu just, rampaging around the world at the same time. It's unbelievable. Getting back to, observing Remembrance Day, am I right that it didn't initially fall necessarily on November 11th and then it was Armistice Day was then passed or a bill introduced to officially observe?
I originally think they called for a Thanksgiving, and that was kind of the history of our Thanksgiving holiday as well, and it evolved into Remembrance Day. And interestingly, in the United States, they celebrate Veterans Day, which really focuses on those people who came out of the war. And interestingly, for us, it's more about Remembrance Day, where we not only remember the veterans, but also remember those who fell. You have to remember that back then, November, after the Great War, they didn't call it World War I because they certainly weren't expecting a World War II.
Right.
They thought that was it. They had afternoon speeches. The Governor General declared the Empire would never forget the deeds of its soldier sons on land, on air, on seas, and that we have laid the foundation for a long peace. They called it the war to end all wars, but unfortunately it wasn't.
When did the poppy become the symbol of Remembrance Day?
That came out of World War I, and I was just mentioning last week that Lillian Freeman of Ottawa, matriarch of the Freeman department store family, actually had Canada's first poppies manufactured in her living room. We call her the Poppy Lady because she started Canada's poppy campaign right here in downtown Ottawa.
It's pretty special here in Ottawa because the national ceremony is held, of course, at the National War Memorial in Ottawa. How is it? I'm not sure if you know this, Ben, but how has it been recognized and observed in the nation's capital over the years?
Well, certainly the War Memorial, which was unveiled in 1939, again, it was prior to World War II. There were certainly hints of war around, but when the memorial was put up in 1939, when the Peace Tower was rebuilt after World War I, those were symbols of a long-lasting peace. So ever since, World War II, certainly the War Memorial has been the center of our celebrations. But, if you go to the small towns of Ontario, it's always striking. You visit a small community at a crossroads, and you see a few homes, and all of a sudden you see a cenotaph in a park, and you look at it, and you see 20 names, and quite often maybe only a handful of different family names. You realize how many lives were lost. And one of the things about World War I was, when you lose 65,000 people, most of them are that younger generation. That was the same generation that was hit by the flu. So that particular generation was hit badly by both the flu and the war.
Ben, really appreciate your time today. Such an important week, as I said, leading up to Remembrance Day itself and the ceremonies, and certainly encourage people to go out to a ceremony. I know we're not right through the pandemic, but we're getting back to a sense of normalcy, and there's ceremonies right across the country, and of course right here in the nation's capital as well. Appreciate your time today, Ben.
Okay, thank you, Derek.
Thank you very much. That's Ben Weiss, from the Historical Society of Ottawa, with a little history there for you. I mean, incredible numbers that he discussed with us. Coming up after the news, it's Lunch with Derek. It's usually Lunch with Sam, but Sam is off this week doing some great work, as I said, with the Legion National Foundation. Sam will be back on Monday, and we're going to discuss some of the top issues in the news with Lunch with Derek right after this. This is Derek Fage filling in for Sam Laprade. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
That's the way I kill my skill sharpen, because I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, a.k.a. your favorite light skin, and you're going to check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911, call it in. Me, I murder every...
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
The regulars, the guys who keep this place in business. Last week, they had something to celebrate. Jason had just finished university, so they toasted his profs, his TAs, his old roommates. Well, they toasted just about everyone. But I worry about and take care of my guys. So even when I know they're not driving, sometimes that means bringing them a little surprise. And then they had a drink to me.
Brought to you by Smart Serve Ontario and Arrive Alive, Drive Sober.
There we go.
Hey, going back in, okay?
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
On the next episode of Simply Cooking by Chef, prendiamo un café. Let's grab a coffee and a sweet treat, a tiramisu. Salut!
This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 101.1 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, November 8th. Good afternoon. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it is 4 degrees and mainly sunny. And here just making news in Ottawa and the Valley. As QP and the Fort government return to the bargaining table, one local school board is hoping that in-person learning continues uninterrupted. Tom D'Amico is the Director of Education for the Ottawa Catholic School Board, and he tells us having kids back in class today is a step in the right direction.
We were preparing for a long-term move to remote learning, and we're really happy that our staff are back today. We know it's not an agreement, so they have not reached the agreement yet, but it was a sign of good faith on both sides that they were willing to go back to the bargaining table.
Premier Doug Ford announced earlier today that he is presenting an improved offer to the union, one that particularly favors low-income workers. Meanwhile, QP says it is technically still in a legal strike position, but it now focusing on a renewed bargaining efforts. With the weather forecast for Ottawa and the Valley, here is City News meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Sunny and quite cool today, but the wind will settle down as we work through the latter part of the morning into the afternoon. Guaranteed high 8 degrees today. That's it. Tonight clear -4, and tomorrow sunshine, the high near 10. Warmer for Thursday and Friday, highs near 18 degrees with more cloud. Could even get a mix of rain and snow Saturday night, early Sunday. For today, the guaranteed high 8.
City News time is 12:02. Federal Conservative leader hopes we don't see a constitutional crisis as more provinces use a notwithstanding clause, and some talk about more independence from the federal government. In an interview with the National Post, Pierre Poilievre says if there is an opening of the Constitution, will lead to months or years of bickering.
Immigration levels should be determined by both demand in Canada for immigrants and demand by immigrants to come here. So, for example, I think we should have an employer-driven economic immigration program whereby employers who have advertised jobs and can't find locals to take them can quickly sponsor people on work permits to come here.
The Ford government in Ontario has received criticism for its use of the notwithstanding clause to handle a contract dispute with education workers. However, it has agreed to repeal that in order to restart negotiations. And the Emergencies Act inquiry continues today with a testimony expected from a politician who took part in the so-called Freedom Convoy border blockades in Alberta. City News reporter Caitlin Lee has the latest.
Earlier, the inquiry heard from the Ontario Provincial Police Superintendent who coordinated the response to end the 6-day Ambassador Bridge blockade in February. Dana Early told the inquiry about the approach of police early on.
Because it was such a long area, the 3 to 4 kilometers that they had occupied, that it would not be safe, as he stated in my summary, to clear the entire area all at once. So with that, he provided options to clearing out different sections of the protest area.
These border crossing blockades, the focus is we're also expecting to hear from Marco Van Hugenbos, the Fort Macleod, Alberta City Councillor charged after organizing a blockade at the Coots Crossing. The inquiry is evaluating whether it was reasonable for the Liberal government to invoke the Emergencies Act to clear out these border protests, as well as the occupation in Ottawa. Reporting live, Caitlin Lee, City News.
I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Connecting you and your community. This is the Sam Laprade Show on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, it's officially good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Sam Laprade Show. Thanks if you've been listening all morning so far, and certainly welcome to those just joining us now in the noontime hour. It is now time for Lunch with Derek. I should cater this thing. Well, except that my guests actually aren't in studio with me, so I'd be eating on my own. There's lots to talk about. Lots to talk about with Lunch with Derek today. I'm joined by Michelle Coates-Mather, founder of Presence and Influence. Good morning. Good afternoon, I should say, Michelle. How are you?
Good morning. Great. Doing well, Derek. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And my good friend Julie Buin, Director of Communications and Public Relations at CAA North and East Ontario, also best-selling author of $1 Billion Startup. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great to have you both here. Well, where should we start? My goodness, it's been a whirlwind 24 hours. Let's start with that. CUPE and the Ford government, rescinding the notwithstanding clause, obviously the strike mandate, winding down pretty quickly after that agreement. What do you make, Michelle, over what you've seen and heard over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, I mean, look, so I look at this through two different lenses, both as a parent who was directly impacted by this latest strike and, as a public affairs professional. I think what we saw is that the government recognized that they probably misjudged the public's mood on this latest strike. I think CUPE, frankly, they won the PR battle. They owned their narrative right out of the gate and defined, I think, the challenge, whereas the government really struggled to clearly articulate why the escalation of the notwithstanding clause was necessary, right? So that's a challenging, I think, narrative to position to the general public writ large, especially in the context of parents who just desperately want their kids in school. That said, I thought the Premier handled his presser yesterday quite effectively. Certainly he seemed reasonable. So the ball really is in CUPE's court now, right? So take the win, but let's not play games. Parents are expecting that both sides are going to come to an agreement. Nobody has patience for another strike. And I think CUPE needs to be a bit cautious here, knowing that they've won, but, don't hang this risk of an ongoing strike over families' heads, because I worry for them. They could lose the battle in the long run. They have support from parents now, but how long will that last?
Julie, what are your thoughts on what's transpired over the last 24 hours?
Well,
I'm glad to see that the government has withdrawn this, because Section 33 is not meant to be used for contract negotiations or for pushing through an agenda that, is a casual sort of tool for disrupting, basic human rights. And we've seen this before with the Ford government. I think that it's not meant to be a big stick in these situations. And to Michelle's point, I think the public sympathy is definitely with the teachers. We're going into a recession by all accounts. And, I think people are very sympathetic to people trying to shore up their financial situation, making sure that they have got coverage and all that sort of thing. And the government taking a hard line on this was totally the wrong tone, totally the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, and Michelle, this morning, Ontario Premier Doug Ford came back out again with his latest press conference, and he says that his government is ready to stop fighting with education workers and to return to the negotiation table with what he's called an improved offer. He's not mentioning what that improved offer is, because they're keeping that between themselves and CUPE. When we look at what each side has, is asking for, or is on the part of the Ford government, what they've put down, do you think there's, was it unrealistic on the CUPE side with 11.7%, and then for Doug Ford's government to come back with a 1.5 and 2.5%? There had to be movement, and there was no movement from either side until obviously, I guess this morning there may be some.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is an example of, CUPE took a hard line very early on. The government didn't meet them halfway, whatever halfway looks like, and I think this is the context. Per Julie's point, we are looking at a recession. So whatever the agreement is, it needs to be reasonable, understanding the context. There's no question that these workers, admin staff, ECEs, janitorial staff deserve a pay raise. There's no question about that. But we need to be reasonable about what that looks like in our current context. And again, I think as a parent, what parents want to know is who is prioritizing what is in the best interest of their children, because we cannot afford any more lost education time for these kids. We just can't. So a solution needs to be brought forward, and we need to get rid of this risk of a potential strike. And hopefully, we'll have news on that, some reconciliation this week.
Julie, this is probably a difficult question, but we've talked about this on the Talkback Hour with David Smith on City News, and just asking what would be a reasonable offer here from both sides. What do you think is there a reasonable offer in your mind that you think could work this out?
I honestly think that it's about the posture that both sides have to be taking. I think it's not unreasonable to view this through the lens of we are now in a different era. Post-pandemic, we've been through a lot, and both sides have got to have a different posture. This is not about returning to what we were and what was, but about improving on and taking the lessons and moving forward. So I think that, the unions have to do that as much as the government. And only then are we going to be able to talk about being reasonable.
Let's change. Sorry, go ahead, Julie.
Nope.
Okay. Sorry. Let's change subjects here and set something sort of on the lighter side. Now, this was a rumor that started last week, and I'm a huge, as you know, Julie, a huge Ottawa Senators fan. Mm-hmm. I've invested a lot of time and money into cheering on my hometown team. And then last week, Twitter kind of exploded when Ryan Reynolds hinted that he may have some interest in being part of investing into this team. And then last night, he's on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and this is what he had to say.
There's a rumor going on that you may be interested in buying an NHL professional hockey team, the Ottawa Senators.
The Ottawa Senators, yes, that is
a Canadian
true.
team.
Yeah.
That is it's an NHL team, the Ottawa Senators. I am trying to do that. It's a very expensive, so I need a partner with really deep pockets. Much bigger. It's called a consortium or consortium when you form a group together to buy an entity. And it's such a fancy way of saying I need a sugar mommy or a sugar daddy.
Yeah, okay, but you do need one.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work out, I'll buy a U.S. senator, which anyone can afford. That's kind of the sort of key there.
Oh my goodness! So this is really an interesting development because I think people sort of thought it was a bit of a pie in the sky, Michelle. Now, I've done a little bit of research, as we all can. You Google what is Ryan Reynolds' net worth, which is in and around $150 million, but I don't think that takes into account necessarily some of his business interests and how much he makes per film and so forth. But what do you think of this? I mean, the fact that he's actually said, I'm interested. What are your thoughts?
I think it's great. I mean, finally, something interesting is happening, in the city of Ottawa. I mean, we got a shout out on the Tonight Show. What better, free PR than this whole discussion? And whether or not it comes to fruition, I mean, it's great that we're having the conversation. I mean, Ryan Reynolds, is, wildly popular. He's a Canadian icon. People love him. I look at this as, free branding opportunity for the Sens too, to be aligned with Ryan in this way. So I think it's great. I hope it's pursued. I'll be curious to see, when the rubber hits the road, what this consortia actually looks like. But hey, we're talking about it today, so I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, too, because the other rumor that I've heard, and I think it's not the most reliable source, but fairly reliable, is that he may actually be coming to tonight's game
against what I heard.
Yeah, against Vancouver, because, of course, he's from Vancouver. The Vancouver Canucks have been his team, but as part of that interview with Jimmy Fallon, the part that we didn't hear is, that he did spend time here in Ottawa, in the Vanier area. And what Julie, just imagine the marketing that he could do for this team alone.
Just the fact that people are talking about it, right? And already on Reddit, people have altered the Sens logo to incorporate Deadpool.
I love it.
Yeah, into the branding. I think from a brand perspective, he has got the right energy and the right level of sass and the right level of transparency and also authenticity. He is a big Canadian fan of Canada and obviously, pushes that agenda. But more than anything, when you look at his other branding, whether it's his Aviator gin or the other things that he gets up to, and his involvement in the community, like he is very present on social media and responds when some kid is like in need and he hears about it, he steps in, and it's done in such an authentic way that he is the kind of spokesperson that really lands the plane for younger demographics, right? So he's got the right profile, whether you like his acting or you don't or whatever. As a business person, I think he's smart and he knows how to leverage his personal brand. Would he move the team? That's the big question. I think any consortium that would be interested would be like, okay, are we going to build downtown Ottawa? Are we going to move out of Ottawa into another, obviously Quebec City is not the right place either because it's not a big enough demographic there, but I think that would be the bigger, more serious question that we'd have to ask.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that I don't think that would be a possibility. I mean, nothing's impossible, but I know we've seen in the past that teams have certainly moved, but from my perspective and from what I've seen from Gary Bettman, I mean, that is the absolute last resort. And the fact that Ryan has a connection to Ottawa as well, that part of his growing up happened here in the city, I don't think, but on the other side of it, Julie, like, this would be a group of investors coming together. So there would be other opinions, but I would put it at a very remote chance that they would move this team. And Michelle, I mean, the excitement of they're back in talks with LeBreton Flats makes this a more attractive team. I got to take a quick break here, but you two stick around. Michelle Coates-Mather, founder of Presence and Influence, and Julie Buin, Director of Communications with CAA North and East Ontario, will join me again for another segment on Lunch with Derek. We'll be right back after this.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hi, this is Dominique Orly. I'm a part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
It was our 35th anniversary. To celebrate, we were on our way to Mama Rosie's, where we had our first date. That's when we heard coming from the radio. So we stopped and listened. It helped us get to safety. So when I think of our anniversary, because now we have even more to celebrate.
What do I like? I like open fires, moonlit nights, chatty letters, rainy days. I like daydreaming. I love this colorful little island of ruby, emerald, and sapphire. Yet often my dark moods come. I'm possessed body and soul by this depression. They say women shouldn't write. Some days I almost give up. But I cannot contain my imagination. I made Anne real. I gave her my love of nature, my love of books, and my childhood dreams. My greatest happiness would be to climb the alpine path and write upon it a woman's humble name.
Lucy Maud Montgomery battled depression, rejection, and sexism to become known around the world for Anne of Green Gables and 19 other novels.
I am Audrey. And I'm Leah.
Leah inspired me to play hockey.
The War Amp has helped me by giving me my devices I need to play hockey.
Audrey has an amputation similar to mine.
What does yours do? The stick clicks in it.
My device from the War Amp allows me to shoot a lot better. It rotates like a wrist, which helps a lot with shooting and stick handling.
When I score a goal, I feel really happy.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Community connection.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. Derek Fage here, filling in for Sam. Sam will be back next week. We continue with Lunch with Derek. Michelle Coates-Mather, founder of Presence and Influence, and Julie Buin, Director of Communications with CAA North and East Ontario, talking about some of the biggest topics of the week, of the day. Something that came to mind to me, Michelle, is, we're really days away of having an entire new city council. Now, I know that all the incumbents that ran certainly won, but setting that aside, we're going to have 11 new city councilors. They've been taking part in orientation and hiring their staff. New council members spending a lot of time around Ottawa City Hall, preparing to take over on November 15th. Of course, we have a new mayor. What do you expect from this new city council and mayor, Michelle?
Yeah, I think, to your point, we've got a lot of fresh faces, which means we've got an opportunity here for even a refresh in tone and approach, in terms of how the day-to-day at City Hall unfolds. Certainly, from my perspective, residents of Ottawa want to see better collaboration, from city councillors. Mark Sutcliffe has won, this mayoral race as a consensus builder, building, a very strong coalition of support from folks from all walks of life. So I think if anybody can achieve that goal of trying to find some consensus and collaboration, at City Hall, it will likely be, Mayor Sutcliffe. But I mean, they're all in a honeymoon phase right now.
Right.
And that won't last. That won't last very long. I would think that one of the first things we'll want to see, and what I would expect our new mayor to tackle, is getting a deal on LRT. This is critical, and I think it's really going to set the tone for his tenure. And what that looks like, it's really going to come down to the new mayor's ability to build good working relationships with his councillor colleagues.
Well, and we're going to find out the results of that inquiry. I remember, Julie, we were supposed to hear about that before the actual election, and then that was postponed till after the new city council was put in place. We don't necessarily know why, other than the fact that they wanted to review the materials. They wanted more time to review materials. That's certainly going to be one, as Michelle said, one of the biggest topics. Outside of LRT, Julie, what else do you think are going to be, sort of the number one issues for this council starting off very quickly?
Well, this council is facing all sorts of scrutiny over the handling of the trucker protest, and that is front of mind for a lot of people, how things were handled with the police. I think the police board and all of the conversation that needs to happen around that has to be, to Michelle's point, a lot more collaborative and a lot more transparency. And the other one is, the official plan for Ottawa, pushing out the urban boundary, and all the conversation that we have around affordable housing and homelessness. These things are becoming a lot more critical, where homelessness is actually spreading to the suburbs. And we're, as we were mentioning earlier, talking about the recession, it's not going to be an easy or comfortable year coming ahead. And I think the city has got a couple of big files that, are going to require some diligence and positive spirit to get through them. I actually saw Mark, Derek, on Saturday at the NAC Gala. Okay. And Jim was there too, standing at opposite ends of the room, both looking very dapper, although Mark out-dappered him because he was wearing a tuxedo. Nice. And it was interesting having two mayors, mayor-elect and the existing, sort of in the same room, and watching people sort of split their attention between the two of them was kind of interesting. So I think Mark's job is going to be rallying the troops around a common cause and getting rid of some of the dissension in council.
And Michelle, I think Julie brought up, the other one is affordable housing, and we've seen new legislations, right? The More Homes Built Faster Act that has been proposed by the provincial government, sort of taking some of that decision-making out of the hands of city council. I've heard actually, just on this show alone, sort of the pros and cons of that legislation. But, now it looks like the city is going to have to work closer with the provincial government when it comes to housing. And I know, John Tory in particular in Toronto is worried that one of the incentives is taking away the fact that they're going to charge fees when it comes to affordable housing, and worried about losing upwards of $200 million. Now I don't know where he comes up with that figure, but housing, Michelle, what do you think they need to do rather quickly here with the new council?
Yeah, that is a critical issue, right? And it's impacting folks of all generations, especially young people in our city. So, this is going to, I think, be one of those issues that We talked about how LRT could sort of define our new mayor's tenure, but affordable housing will as well, because it's playing at a variety of different political levels. So with the province, and it's also a topic being hotly, debated at the federal level. So our new mayor's ability, I think, to work collaboratively with the province, of course, will be key, but also, representing the interests of, what's best for our residents here will be critically important. So I think there's no easy solution to our housing affordability crisis. But what we need right now is a mayor who is really going to advocate for the best interests of our residents to Premier Ford and make sure that we get housing built in a way that makes sense for our city.
Yeah, well said. Really appreciate your time today, both of you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
All right, take care. That is Julie Buin, Director of Communications, with CAA North and East Ontario, and Michelle Coates-Mather, founder of Presence and Influence. Just quickly, before we go to the news here, I want to mention that on Monday on Daytime Ottawa, as you know, the inauguration ceremony is on Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. So on Monday on Daytime Ottawa, which airs at 2, 6, and 11 p.m., we're going to actually speak to some of the new council members. We have quite a few. West Carleton March, Clark Kelly. From College Ward, Lane Johnson. From Knoxdale Marival, Sean Devine. From Rideau Vanier, Stephanie Plante. From Alta Vista, Marty Carr, and from Barhaven East, the new ward, Wilson Lowe. So you'll get a perspective, find out, what this orientation has been like for them, and we'll get their perspective on how they feel they're going to be able to work well with this new city council. As I said, all the incumbents were re-elected, and we have a new mayor, so it's going to be fascinating. Don't go away. This is Derek Fage filling in for Sam Laprade, and you're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
The way I kill my skill sharpen, cause I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, aka your favorite light skin, and you're gonna check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911, call it in. Me, I murder every.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, my life changed forever. During the pandemic, all of our lives changed, and many of us turned to alcohol and drugs to cope. As life returns to normal, the increase in substance use from COVID has lingered, and some police services report an increase in impaired driving that caused heartbreak and devastation. Now, more than ever, we need your commitment to never drive impaired and to encourage all of your family and friends to do the same. Together, we can save lives.
Do you have something to share? Let everyone know about your next meeting, your need for volunteers, or your fundraising event on the Rogers TV Community Billboard. Send us your words and we'll bring them to life on Rogers TV and rogerstv.com. When it's time to spread the word, go to rogerstv.com to add your announcement to the Community Billboard.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, November 8th. Good afternoon. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa and in Smith Falls, mainly sunny, 5 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. Bargaining is underway once again between the Ontario government and QP. Now, the union says its workers are back on the job today after a 2-day strike. Premier Doug Ford says the province is now presenting them with an improved offer. Ford says he is glad both sides are negotiating again a day after he promised to repeal legislation that imposed 4-year contracts on workers, and the union agreed to end its walkout. Ontario Provincial Police Superintendent Dana Early says she briefly considered putting off an operation to clear a blockade of protesters at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor. Early says she was worried that clearing the bridge might intensify the ongoing occupation right here in downtown Ottawa. Now, her testimony is part of the inquiry into the federal government's decision to use the Emergencies Act to remove demonstrators protesting COVID-19 restrictions. Protesters in Ottawa had already been entrenched for weeks by the time police were ready to move on the Windsor-Detroit Ambassador Bridge. And a pilot project within the paramedic service in the Montfort Hospital is being announced this afternoon. The head of the paramedic service and outgoing Mayor Jim Watson will be among those at the Eastern Hospital to make the announcement. Now, that event is scheduled for 2 p.m. today. City News time is 12:32. I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. Derek Fage here, filling in for Sam. Well, we've been taking you on a little tour here on the Sam Laprade Show, in and around various communities, catching up with the different business improvement associations. Yesterday was Wellington West, and today we take you to, one of, I think, everyone's favorite communities here in the city of Ottawa, and that is the Glebe. I'm joined by Patrick Burke, Executive Director of the Glebe BIA. Good afternoon, Patrick.
Good afternoon, Derek. How are you doing?
I am great, thanks. How are you doing? Let's talk about the summer. What was the summer like in the Glebe? You know, we were getting back to sort of a sense of normalcy. Certainly the pandemic isn't over, but, you know, most of us getting back to a sense of normalcy. What was it like over the summer during those summer months in the Glebe?
Yeah, I think it was exactly that. A lot of optimism, and just really nice to see people out and enjoying themselves in a way that we haven't been able to in the past couple of years. And really feeling like the neighborhood was coming to life again after a period. The patios were full, and I think a lot of small business owners, you know, as you mentioned, you know, still dealing with the pandemic, and there's a bit of a ways to go, but so nice to have people back and see that recovery start to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about your role. I mean, for a BIA, what is the role of the Glebe BIA?
So BIAs are associations that we represent the businesses in the area. It's actually like a made in Ontario kind of organization that's spread to many countries in the world. And so we try and represent our members and just remind people that there are a lot of excellent small independent businesses in the Glebe, and to improve the experience when you come down here. So in our BIA in Wellington West and BIAs across the city, you'll notice things like flower pots and banners and nice little touches to make the experience just a little bit better when you're out walking the street, enjoying the day, and supporting local businesses.
What have you been hearing from businesses in the area, Patrick?
I mean, a lot of things. I think, as I mentioned earlier, there is optimism that, you know, we're getting back to almost where we were before the pandemic, especially for restaurants and, you know, personal services, healthcare services. People are really coming back. And so there's a lot of optimism and a lot of hope. But still a bit of a ways to go. And I think we notice on the retail side as well. We have lots of local support, which is really, really grateful. But, you know, there's still some competition and still a bit of recovery left ahead of us. So some of our business owners are doing their best just to get out there, to remind people to shop local, to meet them at the front door, and to just make it a nice experience when you come out to the Glebe.
Yeah, and something that brings people down there, of course, is Lansdowne. I know the Ottawa Red Blacks did not have the greatest of seasons, but certainly the fans still turned out regardless. Atletico Ottawa, I mean, what an incredible story they had going to the championship game. You've got the Ottawa 67s now that had the best start in their history. Are you seeing more people coming down to Lansdowne? And I know, there's been some criticism, and let's put that aside for a moment and just talk about Lansdowne itself. What has the atmosphere been like down there?
Yeah, you're right that fans are coming out, and good to see people back. One of the things that we do as a BIA is we have a game day celebration for the home opener when the Red Blacks come. And it was just really nice to see people on the streets. We had face painters out. We had some stilt walkers and bands just to add to that excitement. And some great stories, including Atletico. Those playoff games were really, really exciting and drew some really engaged crowds. I was in the stands for their last two games, and although the finals wasn't a win, it was really great to get that far, and it was fun to be along for that ride. And so nice when you see a local team kind of develop in terms of their ability to win, but also their ability to bring people to Lansdowne. And so I think there's a renewed sense of excitement around that space.
Yeah, and outside of even Lansdowne, bringing those people down just to the Glebe in general, how much impact does that have on those local small businesses, Patrick?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. And you'll notice if there's an event on like a game day, even a comedy show. John Mulaney was on a couple days ago, and you could just feel the excitement. You saw the patios full on a really warm November day, and so a lot of businesses will benefit because people will stop in on their way down to Lansdowne Park, and that's a really nice benefit to have.
Another wonderful thing about that area in Lansdowne is the farmers market. What was the experience like for the farmers markets over the summer months?
I mean, great as always. One of the advantages, especially over the past 2 years, is that during the summer the farmers market is outdoors, and so you've seen really strong engagement. People coming down, supporting the local farmers in lots of interesting things. They've just had their last outdoor market of the year, so they'll be in the Aberdeen Pavilion going forward, which is a really nice historic heritage building. And you just get a sense that people really, really love that farmers market, and it's something nice that gets people excited and out of the bed on the weekend.
Well, yeah, and it's certainly nice that it's year-round now. As you said, it's so wonderful, having the outdoor market, and it's so vibrant, and we had really a beautiful summer. But to have it year-round, it's wonderful. What about past events? Walk us through some of the events that we saw. You mentioned obviously the Red Blacks opening game. What other events did we see down in the Glebe over the summer?
Well, one of the really nice events, and it was right at the beginning of the summer, was the Great Glebe Garage Sale. And so that's run by the Glebe Community Association, but our members also participate. And that's where you just got a sense of the optimism and people being out and being happy to be out. And everybody who participated, from people who, took the bus in from Montreal or wherever to our local businesses, just they had a great time that day. And then over the summer, we always promote our local restaurants through the Glebe Eats promotion, and so really trying to feature key dishes from local and independent restaurants throughout the neighborhood. And so people take the opportunity to come down and have a night out or a lunch out or something like that. And then upcoming, I know it's still early for some folks, but our Glebe Spree contest will launch next week on November the 15th, so that's something else to be excited about.
Yeah, for sure. Well, give us the details on this year's Glebe Spree.
Yeah, so this is a shopping contest. You can win a $10,000 Glebe shopping spree, and this is really created to encourage people to support their local businesses when they're having their holiday meals or doing their Christmas shopping. And so you pick up a passport, and if you spend $15 in the Glebe, you'll get a sticker. And if you get 10 stickers, you can put your ballot into a box. That's your chance to win a $10,000 shopping spree. We also have any day prizes. So starting on November 15th, if you walk into a store at the right time, you can win a $100 gift certificate.
What other? I imagine you have your Ottawa Christmas market coming back. Is that right?
Yeah, the Ottawa Christmas market is coming back to Lansdowne. It was really, really successful last year. It's a great turnout at the tree lighting ceremony, so that was really, really nice to see. And so that will be back fairly soon, believe it or not. In just a couple of weeks, people will be able to go down to Lansdowne and feel a bit of that Christmas cheer and maybe pick up a couple gifts for people along the way.
Any new businesses to the Glebe that you could highlight?
Yeah, we've had a couple new businesses open, which is really nice to see. We've had Ramen Shop, Ishin Ramen, open just over the spring, and it's a really popular place. There's also Haven's Creamery, which is an ice cream shop. It's a family-run business. Their first location was in London, Ontario, and their second location is in the Glebe. And so that's sort of artisanal ice cream, and it's a really fun place to go. So I would encourage people to stop in there when they get a chance. And, given the weather we've been having, still kind of ice cream season.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So great to hear that some new businesses moving in, and small businesses in particular. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Derek. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. That's the Executive Director of the Glebe BIA, Patrick Burke. This is Derek Fage filling in on the Sam Laprade Show. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Sam Laprade will be right back on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
On the next episode of Simply Cooking by Un Chef, prendiamo un café. Let's grab a coffee and a sweet treat, a tiramisu. Salut!
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
On Tuesday's Daytime Ottawa, Stephen Bechta joins us on the show. He's going to be talking about the return of Dinner in a Box, raising funds for a great cause, the Snowsuit Fund, and you know how much we love the theater on the show. Orpheus Musical Theater will be back to tell us about their latest production. It will be the first production since the pandemic began, and the Outdoor Christmas Craft Show is back. We'll give you some great examples of what you can purchase ahead of the holiday season.
Everybody knows not to drink and drive, but some people still think it's okay to take drugs and drive. Police have the authority, the ability, and the tools to determine if drivers are impaired by legal or illegal drugs. And because drug-impaired drivers can pose just as great a risk as drunk drivers, they face the same penalties, like the loss of their driver's license, a criminal record, fines, and more. A message from the RCMP, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and Arrive Alive, Drive Sober.
Hey folks, it's me, Giovanni Patini, the host of the RTV quiz show, the hottest show on television. It's the hilarious quiz show where you, the viewers, play for valuable non-existent prizes. It's got great trivia, fun facts, and a lot of laughs, all blended together in a perfect cocktail of edutainment. So join us Wednesdays at 7:30 right here on Rogers TV. Nice.
From coast to coast, all across Canada, there's something very special going on. It's time to show your support. Time to spread the word. Time to demonstrate your commitment to safe and sober driving. Join thousands of Canadians and tie a ribbon on something or someone you love. And take the time to have a real conversation about impaired driving. Mad Project Red Ribbon. Tie it, wear it, show it, share it, live it. Find out more at mad.ca.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hey, this is Dominique Orly. I'm a part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown. home, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
Community Connect.
The Sam Laprade Show continues on City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Sam Laprade Show. Derek Fage here, filling in for Sam Laprade this week. Sam is off, focusing on her other role at the Legion National Foundation. She's assisting veterans and their families during this remembrance period. And the good news is Sam will actually be returning to her own show. Sam Laprade joining us at 10:45 to talk about the great work that she is doing while she is away this week. Of course, we are keeping you up to date on what's happening between CUPE and the Ford government. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, with a press conference this morning, says his government will present an improved offer when bargaining resumes with CUPE, who represents 55,000 education workers back on the job after a walkout that closed schools across the province. Speaking at that news conference a little earlier today, Doug Ford declined to provide any specific details about the government's proposal, but said the offer would be especially good for lower income workers. Joining me to talk more about this topic, I am joined by Carrie Lynn Poole-Cotman, Secretary Treasurer of CUPE Local 503 in Ottawa. Good morning, Carrie Lynn.
Good morning.
What do you make of what you heard from Premier Doug Ford this morning?
I think that there's a renewed effort to negotiate a fair deal for the education workers represented by CUPE. Certainly there was an overarching tone that what would be tabled would likely not set a pattern going forward, and trying to address the low wages in the sector, which average right now about $39,000 for those workers.
Carolyn, what do you make about this argument? We've heard this argument being put out by a number of people, in the fact that many of these workers that we're talking about are part-time, 6 hours a day, 190 some days a year. That's why we're seeing these figures of $39,000 a year on average. So low. I mean, what do you say to that argument?
What many people don't know is that the support staff that work in the school board actually face a series of layoffs throughout the year. So they're often laid off over the Christmas holiday, they're laid off over March break, and they are laid off over the summer. Also, being scheduled only 6 hours per week does result in part-time status, which has pension and benefit implications as well. So you can imagine, as a education worker who's employed for 10 months of the year, when facing lower hourly wages, it's very difficult. And relying on employment insurance to fill those gaps is real poverty wages as well. So I think it's important to lift up the fact that these workers have faced 10 years of inadequate increases that did not meet inflation, and now we're in a certain economic moment where that is becoming unsustainable, and the reliance on food banks and not being able to work at a living wage is a real challenge.
Carrie Lynn, what about a push for making these workers full-time? Has that been brought to the table at all?
I can't speak to specifically what the proposals are.
Okay.
The 6 hours a day and making more staff permanent is generally a bargaining issue that CUPE tries to advance. It improves the working conditions and the lives of CUPE members who work in this very important sector. And bargaining has resumed and will play out, and I'm sure that the bargaining team will be advancing their members' desires.
Do you see any movement on CUPE's end? With this 11.7%, Doug Ford saying this morning that he's made an improved offer. It may not, obviously, I don't think it's going to meet that demand of 11.7%. Do you see any movement on CUPE's side?
I think people don't understand the fact that this bargaining team has actually put forward a flat rate proposal, which some fancy math has resonated this into a percentage increase. I am sure, based on my conversation early this morning with OSBCU President Laura Walton, that she is at the table with her team with open hearts and open minds, with the willingness to negotiate a fair contract for their members.
Carrie Lynn, I'm glad you brought up that flat rate, because I don't think it's been talked about enough. You hear it here and there in the media, but it's a great opportunity for us to bring it to our listeners. Maybe you can just describe, what you mean by that flat rate, and maybe some of the confusion around the, talking percentages.
Right. So there are education workers who are 10-month employees who make a low rate of pay over a calendar year. And then there are some of the members in OSBCU who work 12 months of the year and may be at a bit of a higher rate. In order to have some internal equity when it comes to negotiating an increase, a flat rate model actually raises the floor for the lowest paid workers as well as the highest paid workers, so that gap in income does not become wider. So the initial request was a toonie, a loonie, and a quarter on the hourly rate of all workers in OSBCU. So that was the starting position. Math was done to translate that into a percentage, not by this bargaining team, but actually by the government. And so now I assume, based on conversations that I have had, that the emphasis on moving forward with a flat rate to deal with the lowest paid workers is really important.
Carrie Lynn, let's talk about the perspective of unions in general, and what rescinding Bill 28, rescinding the notwithstanding clause, and showing this incredible amount of support that we saw from unions across the board in this country, not even just in this province. What did that mean for union workers in general across the country, do you think, with what's happened over the last 24 hours?
Well, I would even say, since the bill was introduced, what that means for unions across this country is a restoration of our rights to fair collective bargaining, which is a protected ground under the Charts of Rights and Freedoms. It is a significant win for this bill to be repealed. We do not want to be the start of a ripple effect across this country where workers' rights are stripped to collective bargaining. And the solidarity that was demonstrated across this country as well as in this province, combined with the public support for these low-paid education workers, whether it was parents, our allies in the labor movement, progressive groups, it certainly did cause the government to blink and to make a significant pivot, which is a big win for the labor movement.
CUPE has stated that, a strike remains on the table. Why do you think, as a group, they've decided to leave that on the table?
Well, we're back to regular bargaining. So once the bill is repealed, they're at the table. They have every tool available to them. There is a 5-day notice period that needs to be served as per the act that they bargain in. And it's an important signal that while there were grand gestures yesterday, that worker power is building. This group is activated. It has the support and the allies of the broader labor movement, as well as community groups, parents, students, and it's an important tool. And it's one that we should not put in the toolbox and retire.
Right. You mentioned, the support from parents. I'd just like to touch on that a little bit more and expand on that. What kind of support have you seen? I mean, you sounded very encouraged when you mentioned parents in particular.
I I think it's important to note, and Laura has spoken about this quite extensively, is that during the pandemic, these workers were still in schools. These workers were still providing supports to children with exceptionalities that require additional supports to be in a fully inclusive learning environment. In a post-pandemic recovery, the schools are not functioning the way in which they were pre-pandemic. Parents who have children in the school system know that the supports need to be enhanced, invested in order to actually have a recovery for student learning, as well as the ongoing full inclusivity of children in the school system. So, parents are attuned, and we should not forget the fact that there have been significant cash transfer payments to students for them to procure their own services that are inadequate, and actually privatization. So what we need to do is we need to get money invested into the school system to secure these services that OSBCU members deliver each and every day in order for our school system, our public school system, to be strengthened.
Carrie Lynn, just lastly, on that side of encourage, I wonder, you as a group as well, CUPE, perhaps encouraged by what you heard from members of the federal government, including the Prime Minister himself, with the use of the notwithstanding clause and being very disappointed to see it being used in this manner.
I think the best way to describe it is the way that Laura has spoken about it, of using a sledgehammer or the nuclear option to put in a push pin, and preemptively using the notwithstanding clause to end a labor disruption that hadn't even started is a huge overreach of constitutional and charter rights. So it is encouraging that this did reach the national level and that there were comments from elected officials to support the labor movement. And as we go forward, hopefully it will send a message that other premiers across this province, and including Doug Ford,